Welcome, and welcome PAC members and the public who's viewing us live on Facebook. We have Gregor Reed, and Mr. Reed is with the Canadian Centre for Marine Applied Research, and we have about an hour to speak with Mr. Reed and hear his presentation, and then we'll have a few moments, 10-15 minutes for questions, and then we'll go to the break. So, Mr. Reed, I'll let you carry things away, and we're looking forward to hearing what you've got to say about agriculture in Nova Scotia and the Nova Scotia context.
Sure. I'm just going to share my screen here. You've disabled screen sharing. I think you have to give me permission. There we go.
You should be able to share it now.
Yep. Can you see that okay? Nope. Try it again. Okay, there we go. Nope. Hang on.
Usually takes a few seconds to come up.
Yeah. What about now?
More than that usually.
Let me know when you see it. It's got the blue box around it, so I'm assuming it's working. Is it up yet?
You want to try stop sharing it, Gregor?
Okay. Oh, hang on a second here.
Yeah, it's on.
Now.
There
There we go.
Okay. All right. So thanks for inviting me to talk today. My name's Gregor Reed. I'm the director for the Center for Marine Applied Research. We're an independent division under Perennia, which is an agriculture development agency for the province of Nova Scotia. We do a lot of different things. One of the core things that we do is we do a lot of coastal monitoring, environmental data, water quality data, current speeds, those sort of things. That's all available publicly through a number of different platforms. One of our roles is also to provide scientific advice to the province as required. And then we do a lot of other independent projects as well. Anything that contributes to research or sustainable development of coastal resources. I've been involved in doing aquaculture sustainability research for about 25 years now, and environmental monitoring, freshwater, marine water, different types of aquaculture species, some work recently in climate change. And I've had this position now for the last almost 2 years. The instruction I was given today was to provide just a general overview of land-based aquaculture in the environment, not necessarily specific to the proposed operations. So that's what I've done with my presentation. So I'll just go through the slides that I have, and then happy to entertain talks and questions afterwards. Okay. So just this is a fairly high level overview. Land-based aquaculture is really the production of aquatic species on land. It occurs in typically tanks, raceways, or even artificial ponds. There's a variety of different system types. It can be land-based, it can be fully flow-through, recirculation, or a combination of both. It can be freshwater draw, marine water draw, and discharge. If we look at environmental interactions generally, it's just interaction is just a term. It means you could have neutral, positive, or negative interactions. In the case of aquaculture, operations aim to be sited and managed to minimize the potential for negative environmental interactions And that's the responsibility of operators and the regulators. If we look at the list of potential land-based interactions, environmental interactions, they generally fall under a half dozen categories. Therapeutic or chemical usage, fish escape, water draw and discharge, nutrient outputs, birds or other wildlife interactions, and light and sound. So I'm going to go through each one of these very generally. If you look at therapeutics and chemicals, therapeutics, which would be medicines, if they're added directly to the water, they may be called pesticides. And as with any form of animal production and aquaculture, they may occasionally be used to maintain animal health. Some therapeutics, however, can be harmful to aquatic life depending on the type and its use and its concentration. But along with treatment guidelines, therapeutics also have protocols for safe environmental usage as well. And in the case of Nova Scotia, therapeutic use occurs under the direction of a licensed veterinarian, and usage dose must be documented and reported. If therapeutics or other chemicals are used in land-based aquaculture, they're usually mechanisms to prevent release into the environment, or it is treated prior to its discharge. If we look at fish escape, it is possible for fish to escape from land-based aquaculture facilities, although large escape events are rare. Escapes from land-based aquaculture are less correlated with severe storms compared to net pen culture, that's like open water, with the possible exception of some extreme flooding events. Generally, though, there's good opportunity for escape prevention through sound facility design and management practices. If we look at water draw for land-based aquaculture, water draw is typically more of a concern with freshwater usage if it competes with domestic or agriculture needs. The main concern from water draw marine systems is risk of animal entrapment, but this can be minimized or avoided with proper screening or adjusting flow rates. Draw and return of surface water, so that's like not groundwater, is not considered a net usage of water, but management practices need to ensure return water is of an acceptable water quality. So if we look at nutrients, the definition of nutrients are substances essential for life and present in all water bodies of various concentrations. They become a problem when there's either too much or too little in the environment. So it's a quantity issue, mostly. In finfish aquaculture, nutrients typically refer to carbon, nitrogen, or phosphorus, and these can be in solid or dissolved forms. So the solid forms, it would be feces and feed. Dissolved would be excretions like urine. So I'm going to go through each one of these and when they become a problem. So when does carbon become a problem? Solid forms of organic carbon, such as carbohydrates and fiber in fish feed and feces, they do use oxygen as they decompose in both marine and freshwater environments. If excessive amounts of organic material settle on the sea bottom, localized oxygen can be stripped from the sediment, triggering other chemical processes such as increase of toxic sulfides. If this occurs, sulfides are typically locked within the sediment, and it's usually pretty localized, and it is temporary until the oxygen can catch back up. Bottom sulfide monitoring in marine systems is a core component of net pen aquaculture monitoring programs globally, including Nova Scotia. Deposition of organic carbon is not typically an issue with land-based discharge, given most organic solids can be removed before discharge. Here's an example of a facility in Ontario. This is freshwater, and you can see in the figure there's a clarifier and settling ponds, and so the water flow goes through the matter of days in that case to remove the solids. Phosphorus. When does phosphorus become a problem? Solid forms of phosphorus are present in fish feed and feces, and dissolved phosphorus is excreted in fish urine. If the total phosphorus concentration becomes excessive in fresh water, this may cause algal blooms. The term is also known as eutrophication. If large amounts of microalgae, such as phytoplankton, rapidly grow, die, and sink, decomposition will use dissolved oxygen in the water. And this can lead to low oxygen or no oxygen in the water column. Phosphorus is not typically a concern in marine water. When does nitrogen become a problem? Fish excrete dissolved nitrogen in small amounts are present in fish feces. If nitrogen concentrations become excessive in marine waters, this may cause algal blooms, but I'll get to the conditions in which that may occur in a moment. Similar to freshwater, if large amounts of microalgae rapidly grow, die, and sink, oxygen can be stripped from the water during decomposition, resulting in low oxygen or no oxygen in extreme cases. In aquaculture, nitrogen loading is generally not a problem unless it accumulates or concentrations were already elevated in the receiving water body. And nitrogen loading is not normally a problem in freshwater. Other environmental interactions, predation from birds and other animals may occur if there is open access to fish, but this can be mitigated with enclosing culture units, such as nets over raceways, tanks and doors, etc. Noise and light can be produced from farming operations, but these are generally manageable. What are the approaches to reduce potential for negative environmental interactions in aquaculture? And so this is the same approach with all any activities. So the first question that one would pose would be, as a proactive assessment, is it a good idea? What is the level of risk? If there is risk, can it be managed? And this would be comparable to an application review process. The other thing is ongoing monitoring. Are interactions of concern staying within an acceptable limit? And this, of course, is comparable to environmental monitoring program. And then if there is an issue, there's mitigation. If there are negative interactions or impacts, can they be eliminated or reduced to an acceptable level? And what needs to happen for this to occur? This would be comparable to compliance. So all these three steps are utilized and executed in aquaculture jurisdictions worldwide, including Nova Scotia. Proactive assessment. If there are no obvious thresholds that will be exceeded or no-go areas to decline in activity, assessing risk is a common next step. A risk assessment is used to assist in decision-making where there may be uncertainty. A risk assessment tries to answer how likely is an impact to occur, and if it does occur, how serious is it? There's a couple of different approaches to this. Risk assessments may be informal or formal, process depending on the regulator, situation, or scale. What sort of monitoring occurs with land-based aquaculture? Land-based aquaculture in Canada typically focuses on measuring nutrient concentrations at the end of pipe or mixing zone, which is a short distance away from the discharge point. Monitoring criteria are variants of recommendations made by the Canadian Council of Ministers of the Environment. So all the provinces, as well as federal level of government, got together and put out monitoring recommendations for freshwater and marine coastal waters. And these have been implemented now for about 15 years. Given the unique nature of different water bodies, these recommendations are not a one-size-fits-all, but generally aim to maintain the existing state of the water body. That's because, might be freshwater or marine, different nutrient levels, different assimilative capacities. While nutrients are of most interest, therapeutics or chemicals may be monitored for if there's evidence of discharge, but this is not routine. Mitigation. If standard monitoring protocols indicate compliance thresholds have been exceeded, additional monitoring may be required to confirm results. Once confirmed, operators will be required to mitigate. If mitigation is unsuccessful, then enforcement would be the next step. And thank you very much. So that's my general high-level overview, and I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Questions from basic members? Councilor Durkee.
Thank you, Gregor. Most of your research I see in your comments relate to fresh water. Do you
Yep.
have any information as to the impact on saltwater?
Yeah. So it's only been quite recently where there's been, there has been a few historical called pump ashore facilities off and on. And globally right now, most of the facilities are either more or less fully recirc or a hybrid. So from the nutrient level, I mean, we know fairly well what happens when nitrogen goes into the water. So that's been well understood. So in the sense of understanding what would potentially happen, that's pretty well known. I don't have any specific, data on operational ones because they're quite rare. But certainly, if you look at the Canadian Council Minister of the Environment that have provided thresholds on, nitrogen and phosphorus, it's a point source of nutrient discharge, so you wouldn't expect it to behave any differently than any other source. Other than the biology is slightly different, like fish don't produce fecal coliform, so it's not like municipal sewage going into the water. So yeah, so those systems are a bit more rare, but I think we as a scientific community has a fairly good understanding of nutrient loading effects. So I don't know if that quite answers your question.
You have a follow-up, Councilor Murphy?
Not at this time.
Okay. Councilor Coach?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I noticed in some of your slides, you went through them quite rapidly. I can't quite write that quick. But if it's a land base and the monitoring at the end of the pipe or mixing zone short distance away from the discharge point, if you find that there's a problem with that, it's up to the operator to fix that problem. Is that correct?
Typically, yeah.
In saying that, if there becomes a problem, what effect does the problem, what would the problem already do to the species that it may affect, such as bloodworms, clams, rockweed?
Right. Well, if we're talking about, I mean, in general, in terms of like the effluent, the main concern is, are you putting more nutrients into that system that you can accommodate in a healthy context? So keep in mind, there's background concentrations of all these three nutrients that I measured, and the water body is at an existing state. So in the case of nutrient loading, if the water body was sensitive to nutrient loading and you started to elevate concentrations, depending on where the water body was, if it was already high, then you might start to get into eutrophication. So these would be temporary conditions, and once you stop the source of loading, it would generally return back to where it was. If you're looking at how this could trickle up to, you mentioned a couple other species. In a situation where you do get a eutrophication and reduce oxygen, some species are more tolerant to low oxygen than others. Usually has to drop pretty low, but you would get a local reduction of species in those areas where there's reduced oxygen. But again, these are usually temporary. So once you dropped your nutrient loading back, assuming you still have the same water circulations, it would most likely return back to the way it was.
Thank you. You say generally it returns to the normal state that it was. You don't know for sure. That's just an opinion that you have. Generally, it may turn back to the bottom of the species that it had first affected. So it's not really a whole lot of insurance there to protect what's already there, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, if it's eutrophication has been pretty well studied, and even if we look at the context of aquaculture, there's been quite a few studies in terms of nutrient loading, and there is recovery. If you get Yeah, I mean, if so, you got something widespread, like in certain areas of the world where you get lots of agriculture runoff and fertilizer, like these are, large areas, like, hundreds of kilometers. Yeah, you can get persistent dead zones with reduced oxygen. But the monitoring mechanism is designed to identify those points long before they get to that situation anyways. So, yeah, there'd be an intervention prior to getting to those extreme cases. So yeah, I mean, it's been fairly well studied. I mean, I can't say exactly whether you're going to have certain population exactly the same, but I can tell you that typically is quite localized.
Again, you're saying that there's quite a few studies that's been done, but my understanding is Councilor Bergen had mentioned that most of your studies have been in fresh water. Am I correct?
I'm talking about eutrophication in marine systems, like when you get nutrients going into running off, whether it's from agriculture or municipalities. So basically, it's the same nutrient sources that you would be putting in from agriculture. Sorry, from aquaculture, I should say.
Additional questions from PAC? Yeah, Mr. Warner.
Gregor, thank you. Just wondering if there's any data on nutrient impact from land-based open flow systems as compared to the offshore open pen systems, whether there's any substantial difference in the two.
Sorry, can you repeat your question again?
Land-based open flow systems, which is a type of system that's being looked at here now, versus the open pen offshore systems, is there any substantial difference in the nutrient impact?
So you can do those calculations fairly easily. Like you can calculate what's coming out of the fish pretty easily. In terms of the solids, you would be able to remove most of the solids from a land-based aquaculture facility, and that's not the case with open net pen. And in some of the hybrid systems too, you may have filters reducing some of the dissolved nitrogen levels, but not necessarily the case for flow through aquaculture. So the overall load would be less per fish just because of the removal of the solids, but you'd have probably a similar loading with the dissolved nitrogen.
Thank you.
Additional questions from PAC members?
Thanks for your presentation. You kind of hinted at the enforcement if the company was not compliant. Are you familiar with like how much teeth the province has to enforce the regulations if people kind of kept missing the goal?
Yeah, well, I'll let the province speak to some of those specifics when they present, but I can tell you that the enforcement for aquaculture in the province is through the Department of the Environment and Climate Change, I think they're called now. So if there was a threshold tripped, what would typically happen is it would be identified by Fisheries and Aquaculture, and the operator would have an opportunity to make adjustments or changes. And if that didn't occur, then there'd be an opportunity for enforcement at that point. But I would suggest you talk to the province about those specifics.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Gail.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking the time to share your knowledge with us, Gregor. I just wondered if you could talk a little bit more about the hybrid models. So the PAC has learned quite a bit about either pure RAS or pure flow through, but you mentioned hybrid. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So a hybrid model would be you're going to recapture some of the water. So a hybrid might be like it might be a two-pass system, like you might run the water through once and then again a second time and then release it, for example. So it's based on a certain percentage of recapture. Some facilities will say, we're recirculating 65% of water in a given unit of time, a day perhaps. So those are the hybrid systems. Most even fully recirc systems are not entirely fully recirc. I mean, you're going to have a small percentage of exchange you have to recover due to evaporation losses and so forth. And some of them might be 95% and call themselves recirculation. but there's usually varying degrees in there.
Additional questions from PAC? Councilor Hilton?
Do you see any trends in the, you know, in the way that agriculture is going in the province? Obviously, we know there's a number of, you know, hybrid models or closed containment systems in the province. I don't know if you've reviewed the proposal for here, but it doesn't seem to be very many like this one that use extremely large amounts of ocean water. Any thoughts on the two, like which you would recommend really?
Well, in terms of the trend of, so a couple of things are happening, not only in the province, but globally. There's been a lot of interest in land-based aquaculture in these larger facilities. And mostly, I'll talk about globally, then I'll move into Nova Scotia here. Mostly the interest has been in a lot of recirculating aquaculture because, you know, in places like Europe, their markets are in urban areas and you know, if you can use a recirculation facility, you know, fairly close to a city. And then there's a hybrid approach, a combination of the two. And then there's a few full flow through, but those are more rare. There's also a variant of a cross between like land-based and marine aquaculture and the production cycle. So what I mean by that is historically you would grow smolt to, you know, a relatively small size, anywhere from, you know, let's say, you know, 30 grams to up to 100, and then you would stock those in marine net pens. Now there's a movement occurring where the land-based cycle goes to maybe up to a kilogram or even more. So you're stocking large fish into pens, which means that you could grow out fish in less than a year in some cases. With the recirculated, some of these large facilities, it's fairly new growing a fish to full size, market size, we'll say like 5 kilograms or 5.5 kilograms. You know, there's still on the full recirculated ones, you know, there has been some successes, but there's also been a lot of ventures which didn't succeed. So there is some risk involved. You know, likewise, there's risk involved too with pump ashore facilities. People know how to grow fish really well up to like a, you know, small size, but like holding them for an entire production cycle is a bit more tricky. So certainly on the operational sense, like you'd have to, it has to be, you know, pretty well maintained. There's got to be a lot of stewardship. You've got to have a lot of contingencies in place because you have a lot of fish. And, you know, if you don't have proper backup and things, you know, things can go wrong. So the world is in a little bit of a learning phase to some extent. But, you know, things are, you know, the technology is advancing all the time, and there's a lot of investment. So in terms of the trend in Nova Scotia, will probably be a longer grow out period on land and before putting fish into net pen aquaculture. But then, of course, there's obviously interest as the reason why we're here in growing out in a full production cycle on land. And each system has, you know, some risks like everything. But a lot of it comes down to, you know, how it's managed and, you know, is the technology you're using, is it tried and tested, or is it, you know, more at an experimental level? So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but.
Great. Just to follow up to that, can you just provide a little bit more information on how you're, like you said, you're an independent kind of arm of the Nova Scotia government, how you play a role in maybe what's happening at the Law Amendments Committee now and the discussions they're having around these exact regulations that we're debating?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, we're under the umbrella of Prenia, and we do quite a bit of environmental monitoring around the coast, and the data is free to everybody. We also provide scientific advice to the province, so Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture. You know, some examples might be, you know, we do extensive temperature monitoring around the coast, and we try to identify periods of super chill. So that's when fish freeze. So that's places where you wouldn't want to put a fish farm during super chill period. So if somebody, let's say, for example, the province is suggesting somebody's interested in maybe looking at this area for a farm site, we can go and look at our data and say, well, the temperatures there are not really conducive to a year-round aquaculture site. And then they can make decisions based on the information we provide.
Do you do that for every application in the province or just when you're asked?
We're not involved in the actual application process. But if we're asked to provide information, whether it's from the department or even an industry association or a group like yourselves, we'll provide that information.
Thank you.
Additional questions for Casey?
Gregor, just one quick question. The monitoring that you mentioned, who does that? Is that performed by the operator or by the government or?
So typically the operator does some monitoring, but the government, well, first of all, I'm going to go to the existing monitoring progress for Open Net Pen as an example, and then I'll transition into what this might mean for land-based aquaculture. In the case of Open Net Pen aquaculture, the operator does monitoring and reports the data, but there is an auditing process that the department does. So it could be auditing just on the actual field collection. It could be auditing in the laboratory. It could be a fully independent audit, which means that the department might go out there, the next day and do their own collection as well, just to make sure that everybody's getting the same numbers. And the data quality coming into is also audited. As far as land-based aquaculture goes, the monitoring until quite recently was under the purview of the Department of the Environment, and monitoring conditions were historically attached on to the license as a condition to take water. So that responsibility has recently transitioned over to the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture. So they're in the process of developing some guidelines, but I would imagine that it would be a similar approach, that there would be some monitoring requirements, water quality collection from the operator, possibly imaging, depending on what it was, but I would also imagine that there would be an auditing process as well.
Thank you.
Additional questions? I have a question. So one of the potential harms you talked about, nitrogen loading, leading to potentially lower oxygen levels or anoxic conditions. So in your experience, your experience with all areas of Nova Scotia. So this end of the province, what type of risk, if you're able to kind of put that in put some I guess commentary to the risk level and in terms of sort of the magnitude of the area that this might affect, that the outflow pipe. What are some of the issues around potential magnitude of nitrogen loading risk in our context, for instance, and in the context of a fairly sizable aquaculture project?
Yeah. So it's a function of a couple of things, and you can do the math on a lot of this to figure out even before things happen whether there could be an issue. So if you're loading nitrogen to a pretty open environment where there's good current flow, and one would have information on current speed, and you can calculate fairly well what's coming out of a discharge pipe. There are a number of models you can apply, and you'll say, this will be your resultant concentration in this particular area. And you can do really simple models, or you can do like the high resolution ocean geographic model if you have some concerns. So generally, in a flow through system, the water is going to be relatively diluted. You'll still have a nitrogen load in there. if something's going to an open ocean area with relatively high currents, I mean, it'll probably be fairly rapidly diluted. But as I mentioned in my earlier slide, like if you are in a situation where the currents aren't favorable and something is accumulating and it's a nutrient limiting environment, that's when you would see an increase of nutrient levels, and then you might run into some issues. But most nitrogen levels around the coast, like we're not close to a high nutrient situation anyway. So I mean, you do have quite a bit of scope there for accommodation. Again, I mean, you wouldn't want to load this into a semi-enclosed bay with limited current circulation. But nitrogen loading, eutrophication, and modeling of dilution again is fairly well understood. It takes a little bit of work, but that can sort of be done ahead of time. So I guess that's would be the when I was talking about risk earlier, like is it a good idea? So yeah, you could do a bit of scoping work. Scoping work could be done ahead of time to talk about that. But again, as loading an open environment, it's less of a risk.
So just to follow up, so ultimately, what I'm hearing you say is you almost need to do the modeling in order to understand any risks in a particular context for a particular project. Is that correct? Or?
Yeah, you should. I would suggest certainly at least a lower level of scoping. Most facilities that would be loading something in the environment, regardless of what it was, would probably have present some sort of dilution model, and regulators would presumably look over it and say, okay, yep, that makes sense, or no, that doesn't make sense, tweak this part and come back to us, that sort of thing. It depends on the level of complexity. Like if you're talking about, again, loading off of a high current coast, it's not necessarily super complicated, but if you were, getting into a really complex, geography, bathymetry, that would be a little bit more trickier. But again, there's, one would want to collect data on current flows. I mean, we have about 70 current meter records around the coast, and there's things being collected all the time. So that information is there. So it depends on the level of complexity. Whether you're talking the Volkswagen Bug or the sort of Cadillac in terms of the needs. But that would be something I think one would sit down with the regulators and the science folks and decide, okay, well, what's the appropriate requirement here?
Thank you. Additional questions from PAC members? Well, thank you very much. Great presentation, and I really appreciated Casey. Really appreciated your answering all of our questions, and that's a good presentation and a good additional information which to potentially base some of our decisions on moving forward. So I thank you for that, and again, looking forward to perhaps hearing from you in the future. Follow-up questions, you're available for follow-up questions as well?
Yeah, by all means, or you can just email them to me and I can do my best to respond to them.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody. All right.
Thank you.
Bye. I'm Trevor Cunningham, Chair of the Planning Advisory Committee for Municipality District. I'm just checking, and we have with us today, Trevor Cunningham, Chair of the Planning Advisory Committee for Municipality District. I'm just checking, and we have with us today, Trevor Cunningham, Chair of the Planning Advisory Committee for Municipality District. I'm just checking, and we have with us today, Trevor Cunningham, Chair.
Yeah, I think, Christian, I think you might have more than one computer or screen running, so we're getting feedback. If you have more than one, no?
No,
Yeah, I think, Christian, I think you might have more than one
no,
computer.
no,
or
no,
screen
it was
running,
only
so we're
one and it
getting
was mute.
feedback. No?
You'll just have to speak in turns
That's interesting.
with everyone muted, everyone else muted.
Okay.
Interesting.
So we will start and there may be.
Interesting.
It have some delay. My voice over there. I can reconnect. I had only one on.
There may be.
It have some delay. My voice over there. I can reconnect. I had only one on.
There may be.
I will try again. It have some delay. My voice over there. I can reconnect. I had only one on.
There may be.
I will try again. It have some.
I think it's feeding through areas.
Hello. Now it's working.
Now it's working. Thank you. We have our technology issue cleared.
Well, thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. We're streaming live on Facebook, and we have with us representatives from Boreal Salmon. In the rooms, Brian Saunier, and online is Oliver Bertans, Christian Booms, and Mr. Barone. So perhaps Mr. Booms, you could introduce and say a little bit more about your team. Is that possible?
Absolutely. Hello, thank you very much for the opportunity. We were looking forward for this meeting for a while. We had the chance to talk with some of you before. And the people who are participating for Boreal today are first Oliver Bertens. Oliver is the partner and main investor at this point in the project. He has a long experience in the salmon industry. I will allow him to give you more flavor on that. And also, he's based now in United States. Then you have Ignacio Barone. Ignacio is a person, a professional who has been working in the salmon industry also for more than a decade, with a long experience not only in the farming, in the salmon industry, but also in energy. And he will give you also some feedback on that. He's based in the south of Chile. He's responsible for the existing operation of the Berten family in the south of Chile. And then you have in the room Brian Saunier. You know him. He's an entrepreneur and executive in the industry in Canada and Nova Scotia, and he has been working with us for over a year. And that. And in my case, my name is Christian Bulnes. I came from more than a banking experience, over 25 years of banking in Chile, in the States, in Europe. And also I was the CEO of the largest agriculture business distributor in Chile for over 3 years. And we have been working with Boreal for over 4 years. This company was incorporated in 2019 in New Brunswick. And we want to update you where we are and also have the chance to opportunity of answering questions to the committee. And also we have spent a lot of time going through all the media in terms of finding the question that the community at Yarmouth has, and we want to try to cover those today. The other thing that I want to mention before starting is I want to apologize what happened yesterday. I think it was a really bad experience for us. We understood that it was done by all the parties with the best spirit and a good sense, but we had an issue that we invite a local person to be the translator, and the idea was to participate, Oliver and myself helping him. He did a great job, but with a lot of complication in terms of translation and understandings on the idea was to cover some of those questions, and we will revisit them today. I think it created a lot of misunderstandings and wrong communications. So I apologize for the community who was listening for that live participation, but we think that we can cover that today in a better way.
Thank you very much, and we've allotted an hour, as you're well aware, for
Yep.
patients and follow-up questions, and we're very much looking forward and appreciate you coming to the Municipality District of Yarmouth and the Planning Advisory Committee to present to us and
Yeah, and also let me tell you that in Chile, even though that we are among the 5 countries that with a higher level of vaccination, still Canada and Chile, who are doing quite well in terms of fighting this terrible COVID situation, it's impossible almost to travel. I had my 2 first vaccinations were with the Chinese vaccine, the Sinovac, who are accepted almost worldwide, but not in Canada. My 3rd one was a Pfizer, but I need 2 Pfizer in order to enter to Canada. So hopefully we will be able to solve that in the near future. But I apologize for not being there in person.
Thank you. So if you'd like to begin your presentation, we'll.
Okay. Yeah. Let me first.
My time to shine.
Let me know if it is seen properly.
We can see, yeah, we can see the presentation.
Okay. So I think okay, yes, I will give Oliver the room, but just as a comment, as I mentioned it, we have this project that we have been working on this from 2018. We incorporated this company in Canada in 2019. And as you know, we have been talking with the authorities before doing anything in 2018. We explored many alternatives in New Brunswick and in Nova Scotia. But at the end of last year, we entered an agreement to purchase a site in Cheviot Point after spending in 2020 most of the year working for another property in St. Mary's Bay that we had a really bad experience. We will talk about that during the presentation. But we are today with our application presented to the authority in order to get a license to operate this project. And the idea from the beginning, since we purchased the land, we contact the authorities in Yarmouth in order to give you our fully openness in order to talk with anyone that you want. And given the restriction in the COVID, it have to be done over time on this media through video conference. But we look forward to spend time over there. But we want to cover today mainly 3 things. First, a very short review of the project. Second, we want to cover some questions that were raised at the beginning of the dialogue that we have with the Yarmouth authority. We prepare a presentation on that. And third, we take a large sample of issues that were raised at the social media from the Yarmouth community. But obviously, we are more than open to continue talking about any other point that you want to cover today. So Oliver, you can go on. I will.
Sure, I can jump. Good morning, everybody. Again, we'll try to do our best here behind the computer. It's obviously a little more complicated than being in person, but I think we're kind of getting used to it. So I think Christian already made the introduction for why are we here now, but I would like to run basically and explain the project itself, give you some idea of what it means, and then maybe give you some background about who we are more in detail and why why we ended up in southern Nova Scotia for a project like this. So yeah, mainly this is a land-based project for where we want to raise 5,500 metric tons a year of Atlantic salmon and or trout. And so the facilities would be able to hold both species, and with an estimated investment of around $60 million.
Sorry.
And you took the presentation up.
Yeah, I was saying this.
Okay, I think you're more than aware of where the site is, but it's close to the big pond in southern Yarmouth area, south of Yarmouth, and yeah, when it's not many people have asked why are we like close to the big pond if we're using the big pond for any process or whatever, and it's just a coincidence. We're looking for sites that were available and that suit our needs in terms of size and access to open seas, and this site was for sale at one time, so and it met our requirements, so we entered into a purchase agreement for that, and we ended up buying the site, but we're not using any water or resources from the big pond at all, and so it just happened to be there, but we don't want to touch the big pond for any of our process, and not at all. So maybe if you can, in this plan, you can see how the site is being put into more between the big pond and the shoreline, and then you have, I don't know, Christian, if you can use the mouse to point out the different sections. So the intake is going to be a couple of pipes bringing water from the sea. That's going to be 100 meters offshore, and then putting the water into being pumped by it's going to be the pump station, where the water is being pumped into the system and then filtered by UV filtration systems. And then I know that after seeing the presentations by the experts yesterday and this morning, I know that maybe you're more aware of land-based and somewhat kind of experts right now about all the system. But this is the UV filtration system that was explained yesterday, and we're gonna put that here. And then the water is gonna flow individually to all of the growth tanks where the fish are gonna be held separately. So each tank is an independent, independent environment. So to isolate any disease or risk in case we get some issues in one tank, it's not gonna affect the other ones. Then most of the solids gonna be we're gonna feed the fish in tanks and reuse the water in the tanks, adding oxygen and degassing until or before it gets poisonous for the fish, and then the water is gonna go into drum filters to remove all the solids that are not taken out in the tanks. So the tank's gonna be the first part where we're gonna retain the solids, and then whatever is still suspended in the water is gonna be taken out in the drum filtration system. This is nothing new. It's something very used in the land-based industry and many other industries that treat waters with solids, so that the water that goes back into the sea, it's the most clean as possible in terms of solids. And then we're gonna have the discharge going back into the ocean.
One thing that is important to mention here, we purchased 3 sites, and as we probably are aware, we purchased a significant part of Chagua Point is still for sale. We contact the other seller in order to try to find the opportunity to buy something southern than this site, but it was too large. And despite the fact that we will use less than a third of our site for our project, and we will talk about what we want to do with the rest, the other one was even more and more large. So we decided to purchase these three pieces. And there was also at that time another site on the north of the big pond for sale that it was sold. We contact them and it was already sold. But just to give you the idea, most of Chebok Point was and still for sale until today.
Go to the next slide. So basically, one of the differences of a land-based facility, whatever it is, flow-through, hybrid, or RAS, it's to ensure control and optimal growth condition for healthy fish, so we can avoid having disease that is brought from the sea, because we clean the water with UV or sterilizing it, and because we don't have any interaction or contact with wildlife species that might bring or take viruses and other disease. So we choose the hybrid, and then we're gonna go more deep in why choose the flow through system, but it's better than the hybrid flow through, that is better in many ways than a pure flow through, and we think it's better than a RAS, but we can discuss that later. And again, this will allow us to have like a better quality of the fish in flavor, because we're not using used water. So one of the challenges that RAS, big scale RAS facilities and experiences have had recently is that the flavor of the fish, it's kind of muddy, or it doesn't meet the market standards, because they're having issues with the flavor since they're reusing all the water, and this doesn't happen with hybrid flow through. Then, of course, one of the biggest reasons why putting a land-based facility in a determined place is to try to lower or diminish the carbon footprint of the actual salmon being consumed or eaten in North America. I would say more than 90% of the fish being eaten in North America comes from Chile and some from Norway. And so the carbon cycle for it, it's like the footprint is huge. It's being, in the case of Chile, we're more than 700,000 tons per year is being exported to the US. That is farmed deep in the Patagonia, in the southern tip of South America, in cages, using ships to bring the feed, to take the sheep, the fish, and then bring them back, because nobody lives in those regions. It's very far away from everything. And then once the fish is harvested, it's put into ships and sent to the US, frozen, or into airplanes and flown overnight to the fresh markets in North America. So I would say roughly 25% of the cost of the fish that you see in the shelf in the supermarket comes from the logistics and transport for the harvested fish. There's a better and more efficient feed conversion, since the feed, it's more easily eaten by the fish in the tanks, because it's a more controlled environment than what happens in an open net pen in the ocean, where you put the feed into the ocean and you expect the fish to eat it, but you have no control of it. And then in terms of the ecological and more sustainable part of the story in land-based is the waste capture and management of the waste, because you have the opportunity to retain the solids and waste and then deal with it, instead of just putting everything into the sea and not being able to control or hold it. And then in terms of job creation, of course, like any large industry, this will have like full-time, like year-round jobs, and it's a constant activity. So different to some agriculture activities where you have like more seasonal jobs. And of course, it creates a lot of opportunities in there, because it's basically handled by people for the construction and then on the growing process. So just as an overview, what I just told is like the 5,500 ton per year. The footprint of and the scale of our facilities, including roads and warehouses and tanks, it's about 6.5 hectares. And the tank capacity is 82,000 cubic meters, and with a power of around 6 megawatts. This is a huge. This is I would say this is infrastructure industry. Biological industry, because you grow fish, but then it's as well a power industry. Like you need to be very efficient and have a lot of knowledge in terms of how to deal with power, because you're pumping a lot of water. So and one thing that Christian didn't mention is we as a group are very and why we end up looking for land-based projects, because we got a long experience in hydropower facilities in Chile. So we got run-of-the-river power plants in Chile. So we've dealt with these situations about moving large amounts of water into pipes, and we know the energy challenges that a facility like this it's going to bring. So we kind of mix those experiences, water pumping, energy producing, and the fish experience into this like ambitious land-based facility for growing salmon in Canada. Let's go to the next slide. Next. Yeah, so we're gonna go more in deep into the. Let's show the next slide, Christian. It's more illustrative. Going to the like main interactions with the system, I would say that our intake, it's one of the biggest concerns or questions about the people is how it's going to look like. There's going to be big pipes going like 100 meters into the sea and pumping the water in at a depth. The lowest at low tide, it's going to be at a depth of about 5 meters in the place where we want to put the intake. And the reason for having a huge intake, like in the, can you show Christian the mesh? No, that same slide, but with your mouse. Can you put your mouse to like? Yeah, that one. That's a huge piece just to allow to diminish the speed of the water. So we're pumping or bringing a lot of water into the pipes, but when you have a larger area where the water goes through, that allows you to lower the speed of the intake, so that we're not sucking or pumping any fish or any wildlife in the area, because the speed of the intake it's going to be way lower than the sea currents. If you see there, the sea currents in the area are typically over 0.5 meters per second, and the speed of the water going into the pipes is going to be less than 0.14 meters per second. So this is gonna, so it's going to be way less than the speed of the natural speed of the currents in the area.
A lobster can walk on the screen.
Yeah, a lobster can easily walk on the mesh and won't have any problem to swim up and down, or any other moving sea life. This is an explanation that all more detail for what I just said, and that's going to be available for you then to see more in detail there. But it's basically a diagram of how the water flows from the intake to the tanks, UV filters, the tanks again, and then where are the anti-escape screens, so that we are sure that no fish ever gonna go. We have many traps or screens in the system to avoid any escape of the fish, so that we always have it contained and no escapes go into the ocean. and then the water goes to the drum filters to get the sludge treatment and the waste storage, and then the treated water goes back into the ocean. Then some explanation. I know you already heard about this, but it's worth maybe give it another look. It's about the flow through, a hybrid flow through, or our RAS system. So in a flow through, basically what you have is you're pumping the water into the system and then letting the water out. You can certainly have drum filters and get the waste out, but the amount of water used, since you're not doing any intermediate processes, it's gotta be 100%. So all the oxygen and that the fish needs is basically given by the water. So you need a very high rate of water going in and out. Whether in a hybrid flow through process, what we add is we do all what we can do in the tanks and in the system to reduce the amount of water being pumped in. And I mean with that, we do degasification and we add oxygen to the tanks. So we're removing many of the poisonous compounds that are in the water for the fish. But until it gets poisonous, and sometimes, in this case, it becomes poisonous when the amount of nitrogen in different compounds in the water is too high. It becomes poisonous for the fish, and then you need to dilute that, bringing more water in. So when you do that, you're allowed to have something between 50, I would say 50%, 60% of the reuse of the water, just degassing and putting oxygen, and I would mix in the tanks so that it reduces the amount of water being pumped in. If you want to go further into a better and higher rate of recirculating, then you got to deal with biofilters. And the biofilters is what's going to allow the system to remove the poisonous compounds that are basically nitrogen compounds that are poisonous for the fish, or to the fish. And then you can go into a higher rate of recirculation. But having said that, the experiences with biofilters at large scale productions has been so far not good at all. I would say that the biggest facility was built in Miami a couple of years ago. It's they've had big challenges trying to deal with the biofilters. I mean, the biofilter system, a complete RAS, is you're raising two species. You're raising fish, growing fish, and then you have the equilibrium or the constant challenge of raising the bacteria. Those biofilters are basically bacteria or life that are eating the waste and removing the nitrogen. So it's a very sensible and tricky process that needs a lot of experiences, operational skills that still, I would say, in a large scale production, nobody in the world has done it successfully. I think it may come it should come in the near future. There's a lot of energy and money put into that to make it work. And then, since the water, another challenge that they had recently is that the biofilter, all this bacteria, the water is kind of muddy. It's like a mud water. It doesn't look very nice, and apparently it's affecting the fish and the salmon flavor and the taste, because the experiences in the market have failed because people don't like the flavor. It has a funny taste. So there are some challenges with RAS. I think it will come, but then again, just to share with you, if RAS works in the future and works cost effectively and without any production risks, I think that the biggest RAS facilities would be just outside the biggest cities in the world. So there will be no reason to put a RAS facility in Nova Scotia or in Chile. They would be in the maybe out of New York City, out of LA. I would close to the big metropolis that are the biggest consumers, because one of the good things of RAS is that you use very low amount of water, and then you can control temperature and all the chemical situation and characteristics. So why did we go to Nova Scotia? Because we're choosing hybrid flow through, and with a hybrid flow through, you need to have the water quality pretty much what the fish has in nature. So we're looking for the kind of water quality and conditions that Atlantic salmon has in the nature, and that brought us to Northeast America. And
Oliver, a couple of things that I want to add there is, first, it's unobvious, but the waste and the metabolite that all the processes will be generating, if they are flow through hybrid or RAS, are the same. The way that you dispose of them are the ones who change. And the other thing that was mentioned in Gregor's Reed presentation that we were also listening to, you have to be clear that there is not a closed system, a fully closed system. And in that sense, if you go through, there is a lot of news and information regarding big projects who have faced challenges, not only in the state, but in other sites. And you will see that how open they are, it depends on the situation they are facing. And in that sense, some of them who do not have the capability to react in the proper way. That's why we choose a way that. And the other thing is, we decided 3 years ago to go through this using this system, but because we anticipate the problem that those projects are facing. And I think they are a long way to go in order to have it on a scale that is financially viable. There is having a lot of money in terms of research, investigation, but I mean, without subsidies, we don't think that most of the existing ones that are quite small will be able to continue on the market.
Yeah, so this is pretty much the same what we was recently saying. So go to the next slide and we can cover other topics. Then again, if you compare this to, and I mean any land-based project, to compare to the open net pens way of farming, of course, in the sea cages, the water requires use of antibiotics. It's because the disease is more likely to happen between fish, because you have all the water is not treated. It comes as it is. There are predator attraction, high escape risk, and a lot of interaction with other marine life, and of course a lot of generation of garbage in the seabed. And an example is when you see like a per 100 kilogram of feed that is given to the fish in the sea cages, approximately 35 kilograms of those are suspended solids. It's uneaten food and feces. Basically, it goes into the sea bottom and creates this anoxic condition. Whether in a land-based facility, for every 100 kilograms of feed, we got around 30 kilograms of suspended solids. That is the same, uneaten food, feed, and feces. But then with the drum filters, you can keep out everything and have everything but 30 kilograms of particles of suspended solids. But again, the type of particles that you get after the drum filtrations, it's very small particles that are easily diluted in a large amount of water that we're sending back into the ocean. So had a very easy dispersion and degradation in the marine ecosystem. So it's about the quantity and the type of solids that we're sending back to the ocean. Go to the next. This is an example of the type of at the left. This is pretty much the size of the tanks that we're planning to build, completely covered. At the right, this is an existing facility in Chile that we have, and at the bottom, just a comparison to, like, for a house. This is going to be the size of the tanks compared to a 2-story house. So just to give you an idea of the size of the tanks, and so to have a reference. This comes back to what Christian said, that there was a kind of some misunderstanding yesterday with the people of Cancura town, where we have our facilities in Chile. If you see, Christian, can you show first Osorno City? If you see the mouse there, the upper left side of the screen, it's a city with 145,000 people living there. And it's got a river just crossing the city, the Rahue River. The Rahue River comes from the mountains that close by, and from the lake, from the Rahue Lake. So, and between the lake and the city of Osorno, the Rahue River, are more than around 6 of these facilities. Land-based facilities growing salmon, and I mean, with a total production of more than we are planning to do in Nova Scotia right now. So it's going to be more than 5,000 metric tons a year that they're doing there, and the body of water where all the water is coming back, it's a river that is way smaller body of water than the Bay of Fundy. And in Osorno, the people and everybody, like the utilities, are using the water for drinkable water for the whole population in Osorno. So the quality of the water is not being altered in any way, because we meet all the standards. There are standards for DBO and nitrogen and phosphorus, carbon that we need to meet when we in our discharge, that are constantly being tested by us and the authority, and for all the other facilities in the river. And just coming, if you see the lower, like the zoom in, where the town of Cancura is, the people that were interviewed yesterday, they live in Cancura. That's going to be like 400 meters to from the facility. They said, of course, that it took them around 15 minutes to get to the place. It's because they need to cross the river on a bridge. But if you see in a straight line, it's going to be no more than 400 meters on the side. The people, you
can take it in Google Earth. It's 450 meters from the site to
Cancura. And for one of them, it's less than that. So, and they most of the people that work in those facilities live in Cancura, and they drink the water. The water that's being sold by the utilities in Cancura comes from the river adjacent to these facilities, and they never had a problem. So this is just to give you an overview how these facilities are actually involved in the community, in the rivers where they drink the water after that. So I think just to tell you that the water quality is assured, or need to be assured to be clean enough and meet the chemical and biological standards in discharge.
One of the people that was invited yesterday was the president of the Association of the guides of fly fishing in the lake. This region is called the Lakes, and it's a little bit north of the Patagonia. Some people consider it part of the Patagonia, but until the fly fishing, that industry in terms of tourism is one of the most relevant in terms of the growth of tourism. And that's why we invite the president of the Association of Guides. He's an independent guy who works all through the rivers and lakes in the area. And he was saying that they have not had any kind of impact, not only all these facilities in the river, but in the whole south of Chile. I mean, the problem has not been these facilities where you grow fish in land base. The major discussion are obviously, as Oliver mentioned in the beginning, with the large net pens in the south of Chile. And as Oliver mentioned today, the river provides all the water that is consumed in Osorno. All the water that the people receive in Osorno comes from the Rahue. This river is called Rahue, the Rahue River.
Yeah, these are the examples of two actual facilities that we built in the last 10 years. There you can see one of them, you can see the river coming just behind the facility, and in the other one, you can't see the river because it's running through those trees. But they're adjacent to the river, and that's basically the
people in the meeting was there. Yes, they were meeting there.
It looks pretty. I would say this is a smaller scale, but it's the same idea of the type of tanks and the type of facility that we're planning to build. It's just to give you an idea on how it looks like. There you can see the river on the other. It's another angle for
this facility was built last year. I think you give a little flavor on that. I think Oliver and explain.
Yeah, that was built.
That way, not fully. So it's. If
yeah.
I give a.
Go ahead.
Okay.
So now we would like to go with you and try to cover some of the concerns, questions, and some misinformation that we've seen in the media and that people have sent us through authorities or our partners in the region, and try to be open about who we are and what we do, and try to explain whatever comes. So just on who we are, as Christian already do in the intro, he said who we are, but just to cover it again, we are basically a group of business people of Chile with experiences in different areas, energy, salmon, and the finance world, that have been planning this kind of project personally. It's been a dream for me since I started with the land-based operations in Chile around 10 years ago, because all the concerns with the net can growing in the Patagonia were getting higher and higher. Environmental challenges and standards are still getting higher, and there's no more space to raise salmon in net pen, open net pens or cages in the ocean. I would say in the world. The world is at its top in terms of the places where you could put open net pens. So I always had this idea of why not taking it out of the ocean, not dealing with all the waste in the seabed, what it's very ugly, by the way, and keeping the fish in larger tanks, just as we were doing it in a lower scale, because in Chile we're growing it until 500 grams, 700 grams. Why not keeping doing it until it's harvest size about 4 kilos? So we started with this idea, and we're looking for places in the world. And why not Chile? Because as I said before, if we are able to do a land-based facility where you can be wherever you want in terms of the water, where the water has the proper conditions, I wouldn't do it in Chile, because then you have to harvest the fish and put it on a plane or a ship, because it's not being eaten down there. The fish is being eaten in North America. So we started looking for places in North America close to the consumption poles, and the consumers to have a lower footprint, to sell a fresh fish, local food, and so we started our I would say road a couple of years ago, looking for places in Maine. We even looked to the West Coast, and we identified many places. And then we saw New Brunswick and Nova Scotia that had the conditions in terms of temperature and water quality. And once we landed in Nova Scotia, we had some approaches with the authority a couple of years ago, asking, being foreigners, asking how was this, how a land-based concept or project for salmon farming would be received or looked like in Nova Scotia. And we had a very welcoming answer in terms that Nova Scotia was trying to grow their fish and salmon production, and that land-based was definitely a way to do it. So that's why we started the conversations and kept doing it more formally, and then started looking for places. When we ended up in Yarmouth, we went to visit the Yarmouth authorities to tell them our project and how it's going to be viewed or received in the area, and we had a welcoming answer. So what we did from there is try to understand what the process or a licensing process for a facility like this would be. And we've been doing the last 2 years, 2.5 years, trying to design the plant and the characteristics of the plant to be able to provide to submit a license request to the province. And of course, then we learn about the rezoning that is needed in the area and start the conversations with the municipality and of course the council to see what do we need to do or what do we need to meet in terms of standards and to be able to build a project like this in the area.
Also, Oliver, let me add there, why Canada? And I think that's very important. I had the chance 15 years ago to receive an executive from an institution called Ontario Teachers who arrived to Chile saying, we want to invest in infrastructure in this Latin American country. It was the first trip of this person. After those 15 years, the investment of different pension funds of Canada have been in billions of dollars. The Canadian pension fund has a huge investment in water distribution, energy generation, agriculture.
Mining.
After the mining was even before. The mining is a longer story because we shared that we have several Chilean companies listed in Toronto. But I mean, those new investments came in the last 15 years, and I think has been a success for both parties. And always, I have the chance. I'm quite close to a CEO of Ontario, Chile, and the chairman also of the institution, and they were always saying, "Go to invest also back in Canada." I mean, why? Because we like the rule of law in Canada, and the other thing that was very important, in many things, Chile and Canada have similarities in terms of the geography and our characteristics. And in that sense, we share with you that we have a long history in aquaculture and in fishing. And we were looking for an area with people who have that background, where we can contribute, not only building a facility, but understand giving jobs and work with people who have that background. And the other thing that we saw is that it's the same risk that Canada and Nova Scotia is facing that we had with the salmon. We have faced challenges in Chile with the salmon. It has not been, today is a 4.5 billion industry for this country. It represents over 10% of our non-copper exports. But we have faced a couple of years with major diseases. And it's exposure that Canada or Nova Scotia have with some activities in the aquaculture that are quite concentrated. And we think that it's necessary to diversify. And in that sense, also, we will continue participating in Chile in the salmon industry, but we want to diversify the activities and the way to do it. We consider that net pens hybrid flow through are not brother. It could be cousin, but very far cousin. I think, and that's quite important in why we decide to go to Nova Scotia and Canada.
So coming back to the way of that, or how we're gonna face this, or how we've been dealing with the process. Since it's a completely new environment for doing business for us, we've been trying to follow the authorities' recommendations and following their path in all the ways. So we've been mostly collaborative and responsive and asking how to go, how to move forward. And so we don't, sometimes when we've listened to like concerns or challenging from the public, not trusting what we say in our proposal or in our licensing process, or not trusting the way this should be run. I think we don't want to. I mean, we trust in ourselves, and we can tell you that this is great and that this charge and whatever is going to be great. But this is not our job. I think we rely on the work and the seriousness of the different agencies, government agencies involved in a licensing process, and municipality authorities. So we just want to follow the rules, meet the standards that need to be met for a parade like this, and just go by that. We don't want to say that this is the best way to do it, I mean, we just want to meet the standards and follow the rules, and to be able to develop our project. So I think
and also,
go.
That said, Oliver, it's quite important to mention that we are not looking for getting a license. I think that it's like you enter into a marriage. It's not the yes of giving the ring to the. We are thinking in a long-term relationship here, and I think that the regulations will evolve. Everything will improve over time, and we want a part of that. I mean, we understand that this is new. It's new for you over there. It's new for your authorities, even new for us. And in that sense, we want to enter into a relationship, and obviously we want to play a major role and invite Yarmouth and the Southern Nova Scotia on playing a role in the world in this new industry. And we will have to share challenges with the authorities. And we understand that some of them we will not like it, but what is important to us, and then we go back to Canada and Nova Scotia laws, that things will be done properly. That's why maybe we can be doing this in a Central American country and we decide not to do it. We want to play by the rules, but the rules that are respected, and the process until now have been challenged, to be clear. In our sense, we have suffering reading some comments on the media that they are not the ones that you want to read about, not only us, but also about the authorities of your country. But I think we really trust in Nova Scotia, Yarmouth, and Canadian authorities. And that's a major issue for why we are here.
I don't know, Christian, if you want to cover those like concerns in the media,
Yeah.
like one by one, or we jump.
Let's cover some of them. In terms of the transparency, for us, it was not only something that what we have done until now is, in some way, we have been dancing here and we have receiving the music. We offering and we continue to offer, and I know that this is open to the public. We want to talk with all the people that is required over time, but we have respected the timing and the process put by the authorities, and we continue to do it. We have not hiring any kind of lobbyist firm, nothing. Our only key partner there has been Brian Sonia, that you have the chance to have it there, and he will can explain how we approach the authorities in the most open way, and we want to continue doing that. Obviously, with the challenge of the COVID, we will love to have the time to talk with the people, our neighbors, the representatives of the different industries that are there. But we will continue to do it that way. That's the way we do business. And I think it's the only way to do business for the future. And that's very important. In terms of Chevo Point and the Big Pond, what Oliver said before, I will a little bit deeper. The Big Pond is there, and for us, I had not the chance to be on the site. The only one of the three of us who have the chance to be there is Ignacio, and obviously Brian. And I think we can improve the Big Pond in order to be an open space for the community. We know that we have a wetland on our site. We realized that when we purchased, and at that point, we contacted the authorities in order to, okay, how we handle this? How's the right way to handle? We received a name from a Yarmouth authority that they recommend us a name of East Coast Aquatics in order to be our advisor in that sense. And we are working with them, and we will continue working to do it properly according to regulations in Nova Scotia and Canada. We will try to impact the less as possible, and if we do impact at all, we want to compensate as the regulation established in there. But we think that it will be minor damage that we will do it, but on the other way, we think we can really add value to the area in terms of creating trials and an open space for the community. In terms of,
I don't know if we're kind of short of time. I think we're running out of time. I don't know if you want to jump to the questions to have more time for it, or you want us to finish the presentation.
I think that's a good place to be. Our next presentation begins in 15 minutes, so we'll maybe have 10 minutes of question and answer, if that's okay by everybody, and perhaps I'll open the floor if it's all right to members of the PAC to ask questions. So who would like to ask a question of our presenters? Yes, Councilor.
I think PAC member
Sorry.
was first.
Okay, Mr. Kamal.
I seem to go first too many times here. I have to shut up in a while. I appreciate your shedding some light on your proposal. It gave me a lot more insight into it rather than just reading the documents. Much easier to understand. Got a couple questions. One, I'm wondering what happens to the solid waste that's collected from the drum filters.
Good question. Okay, so we are working in two ways to do it. One of our preferred alternative would be to use it for energy production as biofuel. We're in conversations to use it for biofuel. There was a biodigester in the zone that where we should be able to use it, or maybe in our own facility. And another alternative will be to use it as fertilizer. And a third alternative will just to dehydrate it and treat it, and then just send it to an authorized disposal site. So we're working on this. The first one is that I mentioned is the most preferred, but we're still working on it. But the worst case scenario would be to dehydrate it on site and then send it to an authorized place.
And they have been ongoing dialogue with local companies in southern Nova Scotia in that matter. Obviously, we are not able to close anything because we don't have a license, but they are undergoing a dialogue with companies in that sense. In terms of what that we call a cluster, will be other companies involved if this company goes.
Yeah, one other thing, and I think maybe Brian has probably helped you guys with this. I trust you understand the sensitivity with the lobster industry in the area. And just one thing I wonder about with your filter system from the intake, what impact do you see on lobster smolts and other sea life with the intake system filters and the UV filter? If anything's brought in, I'm assuming that any lobster smolts are not going to come out the other end of the line; they'll be gone. But is there any sense of what the impact would be on that?
Sure. So our understanding our understanding is that there's no harm at all for the lobster at any level. That the lobster are not going into the system at all, And we don't foresee any other like bad situation for the lobster in this in the intake. And basically, not because we say it, but like there's a lot of experiences with very even largest intakes in the Bay of Fundy, Nova Scotia, and Maine, for cooling systems, for nuclear plants, coal plants. So in the case of the intakes, this is nothing new. And after using the UV system, as other experts said that before, sterilizing the water won't, and the amount of water being sterilized and then going back to the oceans going to have no effects at all that we foresee. So, and again, I'm not a marine biologist, but if there are some concerns that we need to pay attention to, like specific concerns that we're not aware that we couldn't foresee, so that's I think where the authorities and the experts should raise the hand, and we should pay attention to that and have a double check. So we don't want to. We definitely, our declaration is that we don't want to get in trouble with the community and our neighbors doing other business. We don't foresee any of those risks that you mentioned in the intake at all. And if there's something that we should take account to, we would be more than glad to see how to solve it. But so far, we haven't seen any of those negative interactions with the.
In that sense, also adding to what Oliver is saying, there is a trend in the world that to pump more water out of the ocean, not only for cooling in terms of generation plants, but also there is a major challenge for the world in terms of desalination. The water that many countries in the world we have to consume in the future is from the ocean, and in that sense, more and more experience development have happened in terms of the impact of these intakes. A major difference of us with, for example, with Point Lepreau in New Brunswick or Seabrook in New Hampshire, is that we don't change the temperature of the water. The temperature of the water will be the same, and in that sense, we are not impacted in that sense. But there are a lot of literature on that matter, and I think the fact that it's a Canadian literature, it will should give more confidence to your community. But as Oliver is saying, nothing major. I mean, and it will continue to improve over time, and we will be part of that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Durkee?
Lauren, sorry, was first.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Very valuable information. One of the big concerns I know that the people in the community have, and that's in Chabot Point, is that is a wetland. It's a huge area for bird migration, and where you have decided to put the tanks is also right on the edge, and there's a climate change certainly with we have very strong tides. So how, what has made you decide that that's where your tanks should go? The other concern is that they are visible for any tourists that may be coming into the community, and probably not particularly attractive. So are there any options as to where these tanks could go?
Yeah, so there were a couple of questions there.
More questions there. So.
Yeah, sorry.
No, we will cover all of them. Absolutely.
So going back to the site selection and the wetland, of course, yeah, we are aware that there's a wetland in part of our site. It's not all a wetland. So when we learned about that and how wetlands are supposed to be managed or deal with in Nova Scotia, we hired a professional company that usually works with wetlands and with wetland interventions. And there's a regulation in Nova Scotia on where you have to determine the condition and like an assessment about the wetland, and then determine whether it's a compensation or what kind of actions do you need to have in order to, if you're going to use part of the wetland and fill that in, what kind of compensation or propose a compensation to the municipality.
For alterations, yeah.
There was it's part of our licensing project. We submitted that information and the analysis for these experts to the authorities. And
And also to Yarmouth authorities, Oliver.
Hmm?
We also provide, give the study to the Yarmouth authorities.
Yeah, we're so and all the wildlife there is it's being analyzed and considered, and so the actions are proposed in terms of compensation. We don't. This is a matter where the experts are working on. I think that the regulation is very clear in that matter in Nova Scotia, and so we're mostly willing to follow whatever we need to do that according to the authority requirements in this case, well, regarding the wetland. In terms of the visual impact, of course, I don't know if in our facilities that we show the pictures, we are facing the river and there's a lot of fly fishing in the rivers, and it's very touristic. So we don't want to have that being seen from the river because, of course, I don't think it's ugly, but many people might think so. So what we do most of the time is that we put some trees, curtains of trees before
A green wall.
yeah, a green wall, so that you can see that. I don't know if for the climate conditions it's going to be possible in that part of Canada, but then we have some flexibility in terms of moving the tanks maybe a little way back, so not to be facing the ocean, just being onshore. Our site is quite large, going back into the land, so we have some flexibility in that matter to move the tanks more inland and not be on the shoreline.
And in terms of the wildlife, that the other thing that you mentioned, the application process and the development plan contemplate a whole section on the impact on wildlife. That was also covered for a Canadian, and it was East Aquatic also that covered the analysis of the wildlife there. Plus, there is a lot of material that is done by the Nova Scotian authorities, and we cover that matter. We understand that, and we send our application to the authorities. So we are waiting for feedback in that sense. If there anything to be done, we will do it. I mean, we in that sense, it's not only the wildlife. I mean, when we say that we want to be part of your community, it's in the whole sense. And if we anticipate impact, we want to find the way in order to manage them in the best way, accordingly with the regulation, and not only with the regulation, also with the community. So we are open to listen. We are open to understand what are the issues. If we have to do some changes in terms of the design, we were willing to do it. That's why we trust the process that we are facing today. And when you enter into a process, you are not looking for a yes, but you are looking to the conditions for the short term and the long term. We are into that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we are a bit time limited. What I'll do as chair is we'll take a couple more questions from a couple
Sorry,
more.
one climate change. I don't want to keep it out. Obviously, it's a major issue. I mean, we are in a country that have earthquakes, and when you have earthquakes, so we obviously spend a lot of time analyzing that. But our analysis, we built in Chile with earthquakes. We have a very long sea. So we really have experience that matter. And our analysis, and obviously it will have to be reviewed by the authorities. If something have to happen to this facility, it will not be issue of our facility. If we half of the Atlantic east coast of North America that will be in very serious damage. We are in a high and a contraction and the structure that we don't anticipate nothing. And if it happens something there, it will be
Not for
something
us.
that it will not relevant at all because. But obviously something what we contemplated as engineers, and we spend a lot of time on that. It's we believe in climate change, and we believe in the consequences, and in the way the things have to be done considering it.
Thank you. And we've got Councillor Cushing with a question.
Yeah. Thank you for your presentation. Councilor Derby had touched on some of the questions that I had concerning the wetlands and the severe winter storms that we do have here for erosion and whatnot. And you kind of answered those about maybe moving the tanks back, so thank you for that. But just to clarify, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that the intake of water, the way it's designed, has a less force than the current water that's circulating now through the bay and whatnot. So present current that's already there is not as much as that. So any of like the lobster and other, I'm trying to think what the proper word is, but other species won't be drawn into that intake valve. Am I correct on that?
Sorry, you're asking if the lobsters or any other species might be taken into the pipes, into the system?
Yes.
No, not at all. No swimming or walking species in that place would be taken in, because the suction, the speed of the suction is and the speed of the water coming in. So how it drags species in is very, very low. You won't even feel it. You can put your hand and you won't feel it. It's that's why, because the amount of water is high, but it's divided into many pipes with a very, very large area of suction to diminish the speed of the water going in. So of course, like a very small floating particle might get in, but if something can move by itself or either walking or swimming, it would be it can easily get out. So, and we're gonna have the mesh again to avoid any other larger things coming in. I don't know.
Lobster can walk on the mesh. Obviously, a diver can pass swimming, touching without being suctioned at all. A swimmer, I mean, will not be impacted in any sense with the suction level that we have.
I appreciate the answer. My other question was, and it's kind of a concerning one to me, as some of our previous presenters were not able to give us a lot of information on aquaculture in a saltwater environment. Most of the information we got from freshwater. So I'm a little concerned about, it doesn't appear that we have a lot of information how it's going to affect any of the saltwater environment itself. Your presentation was good. I appreciate the intake water part of it. The outflow, I noticed on each one of the samples, there's the drum filter is there, but in the hybrid system, there's also another filter that cleans the water. So to me, what that's telling me, the drum filter is not taking everything out. So you had to put another filter in for the hybrid stuff. But the one you're talking about is just straight through. So I'm a little concerned about, we don't know enough about what's going back into the water. There hasn't been enough information that I'm satisfied with on how it affects agriculture effects on the seawater and the sea bottom. Thank you.
Last question is Mr. Hilton.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. So like Councilor Cushing, we talked a lot about the intake, not so much about the output, and I think the community has a lot of concerns about what's coming out. And Oliver stated, he felt more comfortable with the open flow or hybrid systems more than the RAS model. But the examples he gave were to the benefit of the fish and not so much to the benefit of the environment or the community. So just wondering if you had any thoughts on why we should be considering the hybrid in open flow systems more than just allowing RAS systems in our community.
Sure. That relates with the comment we just heard. So when you put a full RAS system, you don't put another like filter for solids. What you have, it's a biofilter that kind of decompose or keeps the nitrogen that's in the system so that it's not going back into the sea. Having said that, I mean, in the case of the whole system, the waste is the same because the waste comes from the fish feces, urine, and uneaten feed. So either it's a rust, flow through, or whatever it is, the amount of waste is related to the amount of fish you're growing, not to the system. So, but then what comes back to the water or the type of effluent in the rust system, you have more concentrated effluent because the amount of water bringing the solids it's going to be low amount of water with a lot of solids, so it's going to be less diluted, but the amount is going to be the same. And the big difference is going to be the nitrogen. I would say the nitrogen coming back to the ocean, and we have and the nitrogen is basically fish urine. So, and what we've heard from the experts ourselves before and in the previous presentations is the amount of nitrogen and the quality and the dilution of the nitrogen that we're sending back to the ocean. It's not supposed to do any harm. There's no evidence of that harm in the system. So the cages have that same amount of, or more, way more amount of nitrogen. So what we're doing is just putting back some suspended solids comparable to a rust system. The difference would be in the nitrogens, and the nitrogens, as we all understand, and the amounts of nitrogen that we're sending to the ocean, it's harmless for the environment.
The other thing is, sorry.
And again, if there's a defined nitrogen standard to be discharged in the body of water, like to the sea, that we should meet, of course, we can do that. But in Chile, at least, in other places where this is regulated, fish farms are easily comply with are way lower than the amounts of nitrogen allowed to send into the system. So examples are given all the time with agriculture. I mean, agriculture produces and sends through the rivers more nitrogen way more nitrogen that a farm, a fish farm like this will produce.
And the other thing is, remember that for us it's key to be sustainable, being sustainable is not an issue only for the fish. I think it's for the community, for the consumer, for all the stakeholders involved here. I mean, we want to be recognized as a leading sustainable company in the world in the aquaculture business. We love the idea of RAS being successful, but there are companies who have been over 10 years doing it, and there is a lot of experience in freshwater until you get to small. Our jump is doing it for growing fish, and there have not been many successful experiences in terms of the RAS. So we are making a major jump coming from the net pens to this next step of land-based agriculture. And in that sense, Oliver told you before, why doing it there is because it's key for us to have a good water. And to have good water is to have good water from the beginning until the last day of the facility is operating. So in that sense, our concern are not all the fish, but all the people around, all the industries around, our investors. I think when you are looking for an investment of $60 million, these kind of questions that you are raising are key. I mean, this will be sustainable over time? This is the way that the business is going. And that we have experienced many years, some of us decades, looking for the alternatives like this. I think we are offering here a future land-based facility that I understand your concern because they are not much experience on this matter. And in that sense, what we are doing is invite you to be our partners in the way that we will put a significant amount of money, we will create significant number of jobs and do it in the top way in order to ensure that all the parties are successful here.
Okay, just-
We know how that is challenging.
Just one follow-up, because we're talking partners. We know you as Boreal. One of the community questions was if there's any involvement with any other Canadian or worldwide companies, like your partners like Cermak or anything like that.
Yeah, no. And to be honest, until now, the one who was putting the money is on the screen is Oliver Bertens, and some of us have been putting years of work. Even Brian, who is there, he has been working with us without signing a paper. We are entrepreneurs, we are investors, we are long-term professionals. We are not fronting anyone. Our idea is to build this company to be a large company. We want to list it in the future in Canada. We have facilities not only in Nova Scotia. We are analyzing other opportunities who are moving forward in the States. And we are not fronting anyone. It's our project. We want to create a large Canadian company and who was registered in 2019 with a local legal law firm there, Cox and Palmer. So we are not fronting anyone. You are here talking with the people who are really involved in this project.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we will have to move on to the next presentation in a few minutes, but I would, as PAC Chair, like to thank you all for an excellent presentation and excellent answers. And I'm looking forward as PAC and the community hearing more from other presenters and from you as well as we go through this process of examining aquaculture and the possibilities. So I just will also, before you leave, I'll remind the public to go to the public participation page on our website for all the documents if you're wondering. So again, from the community of Yarmouth, thank you for taking your time and explaining the project more thoroughly, and it's very much appreciated. In the way in which the questions were answered was excellent, and thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The other issue is we have our page already on the web, so it's open to the public. I think it's an opportunity to mention it, given that your community is listening, so they can visit our webpage, and we look forward to being in person there. I will travel to get my 4th vaccine in order to go to Canada the sooner. And thank you very much. We really appreciate your time, and we're open to continue talking with you or the people that you appointed in the community of Yarmouth.
Thank you so much.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye, thanks.
Welcome back, everybody, and we're live on Facebook, and I'd like to welcome Tom Smith and Stacey McCarthy. They're with Sea Farmers Nova Scotia, and they've agreed to come in. We've got about an hour. We're a little bit behind schedule, but we'll take the time to hear their presentation, and then they'll field a number of questions from the PAC committee. So welcome, and if there's anything additionally you'd like to say about yourselves, please feel free.
No, as a matter of fact, I don't know what the format is. The streaming thing is pretty cool. Should I go here?
No, not necessarily.
Oh, I should look there.
They will
Okay.
follow you.
Hi, everyone.
That's the enterprise.
So, thanks for the invitation. It's great to be here. I'm Tom Smith. I'm the Executive Director of the Aquaculture Association in Nova Scotia. Stacey McCarthy is our Manager of Communications and Marketing. And the reason we differentiate the Aquaculture Association is the industry trade association that represents sea farmers, and you're absolutely right. So the difference is not to be understated between the fisheries industry and the aquaculture industry, a farming industry, and a lot akin to anything that you would ever know about farming, whether it's cattle farming or this is taking care of animals, this is crop farming. This is animal husbandry, all of that sort of stuff. So what we wanted to do, and Victoria, thanks for reaching out. And we wanted to talk about, and I know that you've talked to the folks at Boreal, and they have an application into to the provincial government for a land-based salmon farm here in Yarmouth County, the municipality of Yarmouth. Is it Yarmouth County or the municipality?
Municipality.
Municipality. It's both. Okay, well, let's deal with the municipality.
Yeah, let's deal with them.
So I won't necessarily talk about them because I know that you just talked. Was it Brian and I think it was Oliver was here as well? Yeah. And I've talked to them a number of times, but what I did want to share with you is what's going on in aquaculture around Nova Scotia, and particularly the relationship between aquaculture and communities around Nova Scotia. And I think that, that from a development standpoint, the relationship between aquaculture, between farming and in Nova Scotia, the one thing to remember is that regardless of these are family farms that live in the community, that work in the community, and that buy goods and services from the community and support the community in that way. So I'll take you through a little bit of information about aquaculture in Nova Scotia. And we've done a short little PowerPoint here that Penny or Jenny is going to pull up here. And it's working like a clock. It's perfect.
She's the person.
She is, absolutely. So, yeah, okay. There we go. Okay, so we'll zip right into the next slide and move on from there. So, as I said, the ANS, the Aquaculture Association of Nova Scotia, is a trade organization. It's a not-for-profit. We are represented by, when you look at I'll show you a map in a bit about where aquaculture is going on around Nova Scotia, and it is literally from Yarmouth to Mee Cove, from Amherst Shore to the Eastern Shore, all around Nova Scotia. But we've also represented and governed by an independent board of directors that are absolutely reflect the geographic nature of Nova Scotia, as well as 3 species of products that are farmed here. Finfish, primarily you'll know salmon, trout, striped bass, are farmed in both marine waters and land-based here in Nova Scotia. Shellfish, which you'll know, oysters, quahogs, clams, mussels, bay scallops are all farmed in the province of Nova Scotia. And the emerging industry for aquaculture is cultivated sea plants. And matter of fact, we have a research project going on in Cape Breton right now where we're learning to grow sugar kelp on shellfish lines, and just for number one, more opportunity, but really great product for the future of the seaweed industry. More than just right now, most of the seaweed industry is fertilizers, it's an industrial use, that sort of stuff. The cultivated seaweed goes to retail space and consumers and nutraceuticals and pharmaceuticals and all of that sort of stuff. The ANS represents about 95% of all of the farming going on in Nova Scotia. And we think that's important because we are able to give a single voice. For example, Boreal has joined the Aquaculture Association of Nova Scotia to be a part of the emerging industry here in Nova Scotia. We've got more than 150 members, farmers, suppliers, First Nations communities. It's interesting, there are 13 Mi'kmaq communities in Nova Scotia, and 9 of those communities are now actively involved in aquaculture development. Both Finfish, the largest trout farmer in Nova Scotia is Wakeba Fisheries in Cape Breton in the Bedore Lakes, but the other First Nations communities are active in bay scallops, in mussels, and certainly in oysters, and that's an emerging industry for those. Our mission is to support the production of quality farm seafood in the cool, clean waters of Nova Scotia, creating wealth based on a renewable resource. And the key to aquaculture as a farming industry is crops are planted every year, crops are harvested every year and replanted, and the industry goes on from there. So think about what the work that we do, and one of the reasons that we're here is that one of the I think of the Aquaculture Association and our industry trade as a 3-legged stool. The first leg is advocacy for the industry, working with governments, both municipal, federal, and provincial governments on aquaculture regulations, on aquaculture industry standards. We also advocate to industry to make sure that they're holding up their end of the bargain as well, that they're actually living those standards every day. The second leg of the stool is community engagement, and that's getting out into communities and working with communities on information share. So and it's really interesting. I know that at some point in time you'll probably talk to the province. They'll talk about processes. They'll talk about the new regulations and all of that sort of stuff. But one of the fundamentals of those regulations is community engagement. It is really on making sure that Nova Scotians who own the waters around Nova Scotia and our farmers lease those waters from Nova Scotians. They don't necessarily lease it from the province. They lease it from Nova Scotians. And their responsibility is to talk to Nova Scotians about what's going on with agriculture, what's going on near their community, how they're supporting the community. And so that's the second leg of the stool. The third leg of the stool is research and development. And we're actively involved both in research projects that we manage at the association, as well as helping farmers who are looking to do individual research projects and development projects in their area. Codes of best practice, we can get into those, but we produce and manage a number of codes of best practice, from fish health to community engagement to environmental standards, and those are from part of a code of responsibility that farmers sign on to ensure that they're protecting their farms. We can move on. So the other thing that we do, and if we talk a little bit about research and development, we'll get into some of the projects so that you get a breadth of what's actually going on in aquaculture around Nova Scotia. But the other thing you should know is that we're actively involved in expanding third-party certification for farming activities here in the province of Nova Scotia. Every marine salmon farm in the province of Nova Scotia is independently third-party certified by Best Aquaculture Practices, which is the Global Aquaculture Alliance, BAP. And so you might have heard of MSC on the fishery side. BAP is the aquaculture certification standard for aquaculture. And the largest trout farm in Nova Scotia is BAP certified. We're actually running a development project right now to get every shellfish farmer that has export capacity BAP certified, so that retailers, exporters, people in the United States, in England, and wherever that they know that those oysters, those shellfish, those mussels are farmed to BAP standards, so that they can count on the reliability and standards that they represent. So we'll move on to talk about some of the research projects that we lead. But the first thing that we did, what I did want to talk to you about is that last year, the aquaculture industry in Nova Scotia, we commissioned a strategic plan for the development of aquaculture for the future. And I wanted to share a little bit of it with you. And the first part of the strategic plan is to tell our story, identify and share the Nova Scotia aquaculture story, develop a communication plan, which is why Stacy was brought in to create that communications plan so that we can talk to Nova Scotians. We can talk to everybody around the province about what's going on in aquaculture development and proactively communicate with one voice. And the reason, and it's important because on the other side of it, we want to make sure that we talk to Nova Scotians. These are family farms. Just like I said earlier today, our entire team spent the morning out at Nolan's farm in Eel Lake and Salt Bay, and it's telling that story that Nova Scotians, hearing that story is just a wonderful example of what's going on with aquaculture in Nova Scotia. Attract and retain labor. Labor is, and I know that you folks, I'm sure you hear it all of the time, and it's not aquaculture, it's not fisheries, it's every resource-based industry that is in the municipality of Yarmouth. Labor it's a tough time. COVID has brought out a whole bunch of realities in terms of keeping people in our communities, keeping them gainfully employed. So the second leg of our strategic plan is to increase youth engagement in the aquaculture industry, retain and train existing workers. And the interesting thing is that the work that is done on aquaculture farms today and the work that was done 10 years ago, totally different. And I don't know how many of you, and I tell you, we would organize a trip for all of you to go see Nolan. So you would see his counting barge out in the middle of Eel Lake, where he counts, grades, and sorts his oysters, all powered by solar energy. Really, really cool stuff. And he's got a whole, he calls it a vision guide, a vision export tool that he knows that his customers know the size that they're getting, the grade that they're getting, and it's all done right there. That wasn't done 4 or 5 years ago. That was individual. You had to look at it, sort it, grade it, and all that sort of stuff. Now it's all mechanical. So that's a new workforce. I can tell you that all of the marine farms that Kelly Cove Salmon, Cook Aquaculture, operate in marine waters around Nova Scotia. The old days of if you've ever seen a salmon farm and they would take the feed out in the salmon farm, they stand on the side of the big round cage and they throw the feed out in the water. They don't do that anymore. It's a technical center that's located now in Bridgewater that centrally feeds all of the farms around Nova Scotia, so that you know that they're getting the right amount of feed. They're not getting too much feed because you don't want it to fall to the bottom. They're getting the right amount of feed so that they can grow. And again, it's all part of the. So we need researchers, we need technicians, we need people that have got a different skill set and better paying jobs and better opportunities. And we want to attract the skilled labor from outside of the province as well and fill the labor gaps that exist in Nova Scotia. And more and more and more, I'm sure you're hearing from companies all of the time about we need more people to work. We need, and even Nolan this morning, the folks at Innovative Fisheries on the over in Belleville Cove yesterday, they don't have a problem with customers. They've got a problem with trained staff to come in and get the product out. The next part of the strategic plan is really a focus on collaboration with you folks, a focus on collaboration with the provincial government, with the federal government. And the reason there is that we want to work with government to improve processes, to achieve increased application approvals. That's one of the reasons why we're here, is to make sure that you know what's going on from the aquaculture side, so that if there's a breakdown in the process, hopefully we can fill that breakdown and we can provide information that the industry, that you folks need. And then we also want to create opportunities for joint promotion and investment attraction. We want people to come to Nova Scotia. We want people to, investors to, and I'll show you some, I think you're going to find it really interesting stats about the number of new applications that are in the process in Nova Scotia. People are investing in Nova Scotia and bringing money and jobs and opportunity to Nova Scotians. So I'm going to run through these quickly because it's really just to give you an idea of the types of projects that the industry is working on. So the first one is the Aquaculture Association of Nova Scotia has been designated the Aquaculture Sector Council for Nova Scotia. So that responsibility is primarily around, it's being offered by the Department of Labor, Skills and Immigration to develop programs for that sector, attraction, retention, all the way from temporary foreign workers programs to working with the Nova Scotia Community College on new aquaculture development programs, which they just announced. They're starting a new program in January in Shelburne. We've got an Atlantic Fisheries Fund shellfish infrastructure program. That's a $5.5 million program to help farmers like Nolan, to help all shellfish farmers specifically for infrastructure for their gear that they need to grow their business, technology that they need to grow their business, and innovation that they need to grow their business. And in that one, we've gotten a hold of a fund of $5.5 million that is able to be used by farmers. 70% of it non-repayable. So each individual farmer gives us a project. We put it through obviously the project has to be approved by, it's an Atlantic Fisheries Fund. It has to be approved by the Fisheries Fund, but that's an opportunity for small farmers to get access to capital to grow their business. The best aquaculture practice, we already talked about that. We've got a research project running in Cape Breton right now with 3 farmers to grow sugar kelp on shellfish lines. It's a really emerging field, and so that's kind of an idea of some of the research stuff that we're doing around the province. The Atlantic Export Cafe, one of the things that COVID taught us is 2 things, or a number of things actually. COVID has been a learning experience for everybody, is that our traditional markets, when COVID hit, food service closed down, restaurants closed down, export markets closed down. We ran out of people to sell to. There was nobody to sell to. And so even though the fin fish side of Nova Scotia probably went down about 40%, because there were still salmon sales going to retail stores. But the shellfish side was highly dependent on restaurants, food service. They didn't go down 40%, they went down 100%. For the whole first year of COVID, the shellfish industry in Nova Scotia, there were no sales people like Nolan and people like Scott Dockendorf up in Cape Breton selling mussels, they had no one to sell to. So it told us we needed to expand our markets. It also told us we needed shelf-ready products. So shelf-ready products on finfish and salmon and trout, that sort of stuff, you've all seen them in the stores. So everybody can understand that, but shelf-ready products for shellfish is a whole value-added section that will help grow this industry. And the other thing it taught us is we need packaging. So different types of packaging. So there are new atmosphere control packaging for oysters that now can go onto a retail shelf without having to worry about the code dating and the product going bad in a very short period of time. So that sort of stuff led us to we sponsor an export cafe in New York where we bring. I think last year there were 20 oyster farmers from Atlantic Canada, not just Nova Scotia, but Atlantic Canada, to introduce them to buyers in the New York and surrounding area. Nolan still has 2 buyers that he's shipping to every day, well, every week, that he's still got those buyers that he met last year at that. And we're doing that again. The Persurance Center is working on a project to restock and re-energize the oyster industry in the Bredor Lakes. And I don't know if you, in 2004, the oyster industry in the Bredor Lakes was quite vibrant, and it died. There's a virus there's a bacteria actually from the eastern part of the United States that got up into the Bredor Lakes and killed all the oysters. So we're running a research project now to repopulate the Bredor Lakes for oysters using different farming methods and different technologies. So that's kind of that sort of stuff. The scoping project, I think you know that and if Boreal didn't talk about it this morning, the province will talk about it, is that every farm application that goes through the process in Nova Scotia goes through a scoping phase. So the option is granted for a farm, and during that scoping phase, there's mandated oceanographic work that has to go on, but also mandated community engagement work that has to go on. So we've developed reports, we've developed forms, we've developed contact lists. They have to go out. So new farms going into Nova Scotia do not get a signature from the province that says you can put product in there tomorrow. What they get is they get the approval that you can start talking to your community tomorrow. And they're mandated to produce a report called a scoping report that has to go back to the province before the province signs up. And we'll get into that because it's not even really the province anymore. Now it's the Independent Agriculture Review Board that has to sign off. But that being said, that scoping project, so what we do is we've produced reports, forms, videos, training sessions that farmers have to use because they have to come up and talk to you. They have to come up and talk to you and your constituents about what's going on. So there are guidelines about how, so if you're putting a farm, for example, well, Raymond D'Entremont, who Grand Pass just got approved for 3 oyster farms in Argyle, in the municipality, but he had to go and talk to people around that area and record. They either liked the idea of an oyster farm there or they didn't like the idea, and he had to produce all those reports before he was able to move ahead with that project. Security bond, again, this is all about, community trust, public trust. The new regulations for aquaculture development in the province of Nova Scotia demands that every farm produces a security bond that is payable to the province of Nova Scotia if they go broke. If they leave in the middle of the night, who's going to clean up the mess tomorrow? And before 2016, when the legislation came into effect, a farmer could go broke tomorrow. You'd get a call I'm sure from it's all broken. Who's going to clean it up? And you'd look around and say, I have no idea. Well, right now we've got a fund that we manage that is available to, if anyone does go broke, if anyone pulls out in the middle of the night and there's debris along the that's left from a farm, then we've got a fund that is payable to the province of Nova Scotia that will go out and get the folks, the infrastructure to clean it up, the infrastructure to take it away and make sure that the water stay clean. Now, I want to be clear that we're not responsible for anything that happened before 2016 because there's still a lot of that stuff going on. But I will talk to you about beach cleanup programs that we've run over the last number of years that have been very successful. And we work with the municipalities, we work with towns and community residents to put together a couple of beach cleanups every year, just to go out there and just have some fun and see if we can clean some stuff up. We partner, the other thing I'd invite all of you, we partner with the province of Nova Scotia, the ANS and the province of Nova Scotia, do an annual ministers conference and sea farmers conference in Halifax. Next year, it's February 23rd, 24th. You're all invited. You should go. It's a pretty good deal, and we enjoy it. You'll see, and we didn't do it last year, and I don't know if you might have participated in. We did 5 digital series last year. They were, on, and again, they all focused on what we learned from COVID. New retail opportunities, new sales opportunities, technology improvements. So those 5 digital series were really kind of cool. And but the year before, we did an in-person Sea Farmers Conference and Ministers Conference. 800 delegates showed up in Halifax to talk about fisheries and aquaculture. So the lobster fishery is there, the brown fishery is there, aquaculture is there, and along with 70, I think there were 78 trade show booths. So you folks could talk to folks that are involved in the industry, and you could talk to them, face to face, rather than going out and seeing all these people in 80 different towns and cities around. That's not feasible, but going to Halifax and seeing them in one place is. So I'd encourage you to kind of take a look at that. The other thing that we do is we work with the University of Prince Edward Island on an iTrends project. We monitor sea lice in Nova Scotia. Our marine farms are mandated. They count sea lice every second week in the project. They report it through an iTrends project that University of PEI runs, but the province gets a copy of that and gets notification of the sea lice counts in Nova Scotia. And we partner with the folks in New Brunswick and the folks in Newfoundland on the same kind of project. So just give you an idea of some of the development projects that are going on around the province. So to give you an idea of aquaculture in Nova Scotia, it's $90 million of market value. It's also about 75 to $80 million in spin-off value, whether that's trucking companies, different types of purchasing, feed mills, that sort of stuff. It's 800 direct year-round jobs. And the other thing about aquaculture is it is year-round. That the animals need to be taken care of all year round. And 1,500 indirect supporting jobs, so they would be truckers and other jobs. There are right now in the province of Nova Scotia 250 aquaculture leases, 46 of which are salmon, and 20 of those are land-based finfish applications. And so those are both grow out, which is what Borealis is promoting. Well, but they're also promoting a hatchery as well. So there are a number of hatchery land-based facilities in Nova Scotia. And Cook Aquaculture just announced in Centreville, and it was provincially approved, a new hatchery post-smoke facility, and for 2000, I think they're looking at 2025 operation. And the interesting thing, that's again part of research development, is that you take a hatchery product with a 250 gram salmon that goes into a sea cage, or we have a facility that they're going to grow those salmon out to 500 gram, so they go into the water for about a half the time, so to grow out. So that's part of what's going on. So it's better for the fish, it's better for the environment as well. So there's Nova Scotia, and I'll show you the little black dots, and you can't really see. Those are existing leases. Those 250 leases are around the province of Nova Scotia, and you can see they're from Yarmouth to Cape Breton. What I want to share with you is the green dots are new administrative applications. So the way that when you talk to the province, they will tell you there's 2 types of application processes: administrative applications and adjudicative applications. The adjudicative applications are for anything that is new in marine waters or an expansion in marine waters. Simple as that. The administrative stuff is all of the things like amendments and but not an expansion. So even if a farm was looking, a marine farm is looking to put more fish in the water, that's an adjudicative application because it's an expansion of the biomass and expansion of the farm. So, and the other thing is there's a couple of options that are granted by the province so that they can look at their scoping phase and they can look at the work in communities and the work in developing the farm. And then just to give you a list of what it looks like is the next slide. That's the development in Nova Scotia that is currently underway. Now, none of those are approved, but they are in various stages of the process of both the administrative side at the top and the adjudicative side at the bottom. And and they're all in different phases, but that's I mean, for Nova Scotia and for the aquaculture industry, that's a sign of the investment that folks are prepared to make in providing more opportunity for Nova Scotia, more jobs, and more opportunity for communities. And you've got this PowerPoint, so you can keep it and use it and all of that sort of stuff. The other thing that I wanted to share with you is that part of the 2000, and I always say it's 2016 regulations. I know they were formally passed in 2015, but the implementation phase was really 2016. So for the last 5 years, and it's really, really interesting. I want to point this out that license and leasing applications have to satisfy those requirements. Okay, those are provincial regulations, and I know when you meet the province, they're going to talk about stuff like that. But they have to talk about, and so each individual firm that produces an application for the province of Nova Scotia has to produce a development plan, which is brand new for the province of Nova Scotia from 2016. They have to produce a farm management plan, which is brand new. Every farm in the province has a farm management plan that is approved by the province of Nova Scotia. It's approved by the veterinaries, it's approved by the administrators, all of that sort of stuff. But they have to satisfy the optimum use of marine resources. And so that question has to be answered. Is it? Because if it's not the optimum use, then it will be rejected. It has to produce the contribution of the proposed operation to the community and provincial economic development, fishery activities in the public waters surrounding the operation. So you have to have an understanding of what it means to the fishery around the activity. The oceanographic and biophysical character. So that's all that oceanographic work that has to be understood. Who are the other users of the public water surrounding the proposed application and the public right of navigation? So, and I remember that I gave a presentation to the town of Pugwash a couple of years ago about there was new oyster farms going up there. And one of the questions was, well, but I'm not going to be able to walk on the beach anymore. Yes, you are. It's absolutely mandated that public right to navigate. I'm not going to be able to take my boat out and go around the bay like I used to. Absolutely, you can. Okay, there may be a farm there that you have to watch out for buoys, but it's not as if you're restricted, and it's not as if you're hampered from going around and using the public waters. The sustainability of wild salmon is a mandated. So if you're going to operate a farm, and whether or not that's a shellfish farm or a marine salmon farm, where there is a salmon run, you have to have mitigation standards in place so that we're not affecting wild salmon in the province. And as a matter of fact, one of the things that I know that we're doing we're trying to do in the Midway River with the Midway River Salmon Association is to come up with a strategy to, number one, the liming is already going on to kind of revitalize the Midway River. But we're looking to grow wild salmon and release them upstream to see if that helps repopulate the Midway River, which is now, there is no salmon in the Midway River right now, but we think that it's a great opportunity to build that back up. And the last one is the number and productivity of other aquaculture sites. So what that means is that aquaculture sites on top of sites is not in the best interest of the province. It's not in the best interest of the industry as well. So I just want to share that because those are mandated things that applicants must take a look at. Wanted to share with you that this is research that we've done over the last number. I'm going to skip through this, but there's no doubt about it. that there is concern from us, from Nova Scotians about aquaculture development. And our job is to make sure we meet with anybody that is concerned with those folks and both inform, help them understand what we're trying to do. But there is widespread public support for aquaculture as well at around 78%. We'll just keep on, I'm gonna thumb through these a bit. And part of that research is, you know, what are your reasons if you're 80% or 78% saying that you support aquaculture, why? And it's really about providing opportunities in rural areas. It's good for the economy. We'll talk about helping to protect fish stocks, which is something that some Nova Scotians, not all Nova Scotians, actually get. That growing farm salmon, the wild salmon stocks and the wild fishery is at risk of being overused and overexploited and all of that sort of stuff. And so this does help this. The one thing and the other thing that you notice is that when you looked at the map, aquaculture is happening in rural and coastal communities. There's not much going on in Halifax because, number one, I think it makes sense, but there's no call for it, but it's going on in rural and coastal communities right around the province. The other thing that COVID taught us is this importance of buying food local and supporting local farmers. And whether or not that's a cattle farmer or a chicken farmer or a salmon farmer or an oyster farmer, the whole idea, 87% get it of Nova Scotians, that supporting local producers is the deal, and it should be, the deal. I talked about this earlier because it's interesting that while I think the number seems to me to be lower, but the number at 64%, that folks actually, when you talk about farming, of sea farming, that folks get the fact that farming is farming. Not everybody does. It's 3/4 of the population, but that's a good statistic that this farming industry is starting to be recognized as a farming industry. So I want to share with you a couple of things, and I know that this is some of the stuff that we talk about all the time. Land-based salmon farming can damage wetlands along Southwest Nova, and both the marine-based and land-based salmon farming are done in a responsible, sustainable manner. I think that the importance for you folks is to know that it isn't the Wild West in aquaculture anymore. There are standards, there are procedures, there are processes, there are systems in place to ensure that you're informed and that the environment and the economy is protected. Consumers are looking for high protein seafoods in their diet, and salmon farming does take stress off the wild catch salmon population. Aquaculture has minimal economic benefit to communities. I don't believe that for a second. In addition to creating good paying year-round jobs, salmon farmers buy goods and services from a large number of businesses. So it's not just the people they employ, it's the people that they buy from and the people that they employ. Fish farms and wild fisheries can coexist. And a matter of fact, I think that that's one of the reasons that Sea Farmers Conference and the Fisheries Conference came together, is so that we understand each other's issues. And farm seafood is a sustainable way to provide locally grown food. And we talked a lot about modern tools that apply to aquaculture that are driving innovation. I'm not going to get into that anymore. But fish farms are mandated under provincial regulations to ensure public and industry engagement. And part of that whole technical review and analysis. And fish farms have been around for a long time and include sites near prime lobster areas on the South Shore. And we've got research. And again, I know some people don't like research, and this research paper says this and that, but again, the lobster industry in Nova Scotia, the aquaculture industry in Nova Scotia has grown substantially, and so has the lobster industry in concert at the same time. So looking to the future, it's clear that no single salmon farm fits all regions, but sea farming, semi-closed farming, offshore and land-based is all a way to move the aquaculture industry ahead and to support communities as the industry grows. The ANS, we've got a team of professionals that not only love seafood, but we love Nova Scotia, and we work every day to try to figure out how we can get out and make sure that everybody that we deal with has at least got some information. You can make your own informed decisions and go from there. We support science-based decisions, and we try to pass those on. And then we do understand the concerns that are out there about aquaculture development. And that's one of the reasons why we're more than prepared to come out and talk about it, share ideas, get your feedback. You know, Tom, I don't get this. Tell me about this. And that's kind of what we're all about. So that's why we're here. And I think that's it. Yes, it is.
Thank you very much. Excellent presentation.
Thank you so much.
We're glad you've agreed to be asked a number of questions from the PAC committee. And what I'll do is I'll open the floor. I see Councillor Cushing's got a question.
Well, I must say that was a very interesting presentation again. The last two have been very informative. A couple of things that I've seen. The monitoring of your sea lice.
Yes.
Is there a plan how to reduce that problem
Yeah.
with sea lice?
So great question, because, you know, sea lice is it's misunderstood to a certain extent, but it is absolutely a villain to farming. There's no doubt about that. Nova Scotia has been, I don't want to say lucky, been very proactive in managing sea lice in Nova Scotia. So we do have sea lice in Nova Scotia. Make no mistake about it. I couldn't tell you that we don't, but we actually do not treat right now for sea lice in Nova Scotia because the levels are so low.
Really?
Dissimilar to New Brunswick and dissimilar to Newfoundland where they treat. And so the other thing, so that's the first thing you should know about now salmon and trout farming, all marine finfish farming in the province of Nova Scotia. We don't treat for sea lice because it is so minimal, and we record those numbers. The farmers are mandated to record them every second week. So that's the first thing on treating sea lice. And that's why I say this industry is so much different than it was 15 years ago. 15 years ago, the baths that were used, even though the baths that were used were federally approved and mandated, were not the baths that they use now. So there are low toxic, low chemical. There's no chemical, but baths that are used to protect sea lice. The other thing that I know Cook Aquaculture in New Brunswick is looking at is thermal sea lice removal, where they actually take the salmon, they run them through a thermal, it's like a feeding station, if you will, but they run them through there, and I think the temperature is like 82 degrees or something for like 8 seconds, and the sea lice fall off, and they collect the sea lice and they compost it, go to landfills and compost it. And the other thing that is being developed in Nova Scotia, we're going to be the first cleaner fish. So if you've ever heard of a species called lumpfish, so lumpfish are also called cleaner fish. We're developing a project in Woods Harbor. I pointed that way, but I should be pointing whichever north is. So we're developing a project that we're actually migrating from Memorial University and VEI. They're going to develop a cleaner fish hatchery in Woods Harbor, and so for whatever reason, lumpfish love to eat sea lice, and so that's in development. Probably in the next couple of years, that'll be operational. So that's operational in Memorial, and like most universities, they're not in the business of operating stuff. They're in the business of figuring it out, and then they sell it. And so we're actually bringing that over here.
My second part of the question, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Certainly, yes.
Yep. So I'll skip the first one. I'll go back. So are you trying to tie the increase of lobster stock to fish farming?
No, I think that what I'm trying to, and I believe that there are lobster fishermen, okay, that think and that believe that salmon farming or marine farming will hurt the future of their stock. And I don't believe that. I think the research and the science shows that that is not the case. The other thing that it really illustrates is we haven't done a very good job of trying to get around and see, enough lobster farmers to talk about aquaculture and aquaculture development. And that's one of the things that we hope to do better.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
But it's certainly, I think that, no, I'm not trying to tie it to any increase. What
Okay,
I am trying to say is that I don't,
doesn't harm.
yeah, I don't believe that there is a harm.
My last question, again, you were saying that you're encouraging, bringing people in, skilled people in to work in Nova Scotia into
Yep.
the fish farming. How can we encourage our local people in Nova Scotia to get interested in learning about
That's a great
skills of sea farming?
Yeah, that's a great
Listen,
question.
I have no trouble people wanting to work to bring them in, but I'm sure we have a number of people in Nova Scotia that still
Yeah.
learn to work in this industry. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, again, I'm not denying that skilled labor is required, and sometimes we have to bring them from outside, but IG, I
Yeah.
think we should be able to do ourselves a favor.
Oh, absolutely. And I think you're right on the money. And if you look at, and one of the reasons we did that strategic plan last year, and if you look at that second set of pillars on attraction and retention, the first pillar there is to increase youth involvement. And so we've got to get out into, and I think we've got to get out into grade 4s and grade 5s and grade 6s. I mean, university kids are one thing, but get out into these communities. In rural communities, in coastal communities, get into grades 4, 5, 6, 7, and say, look, you don't have to leave. You don't have to go to Halifax or Toronto or wherever to find a good job. You can stay here. And so that's why that's such an important pillar of our strategic plan. So our only commitment is we're going to do whatever we can, working with the Department of Education, work with the Department of Labor and Advanced Education, is to talk to people about staying in Nova Scotia.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Hilton.
Thank you. You spoke about like a remediation fund. Does that apply to on-land agriculture as well, or?
No, it does not. That's a good question for clarification. The way the regulations work is that I could send you the chart of each individual. So an oyster. So this is about marine waters. So the remediation, the surety fund, or the surety fund bond is about marine waters, and it's about and it goes from small shellfish farms that have got no gear on the bottom, that pay a very, very minimal amount, because the amount of gear that they would have around would be some buoys, corner buoys marking their lease. And if they, just gave up and went away, who's going to go and get those buoys out of the water? So it's very minimal, all the way to bigger shellfish farms like Nolan's, for example. If he went broke, there's a lot of gear out in that water. So no, it is specific to, and it is specifically written in legislation that land-based aquaculture does not apply. There's no fund for that. The other thing that is marine farms with no gear do not apply. So but land-based aquaculture does not pay into that surety fund fund.
And just Sea Farmers Nova Scotia, how long have you been around, and kind of who funds your programs?
So 1977 is when the Aquaculture Association was founded. Again, it's been a not-for-profit forever, but in the early days, I mean, there wasn't an executive director. It was an independent board. It was volunteers all the way through into the 90s, when they hired the first executive director back in the 90s. So our funding sources come from, oh goodness gracious, might as well talk about probably about eight or nine different funding streams. The one thing that we do not get, now we used to, I'd be very candid about the Department of Fisheries and Agriculture used to fund a part of our operating budget back before I got here. No, actually, the first year that I was here, they still funded. I don't know if maybe they didn't like me, and DFO used to fund the Aquaculture Association in terms of development monies and all that. Our funding now is membership fees. So it's an independent run, not-for-profit. We fund from membership fees The Sea Farmers Conference, for example, is a revenue stream. It's a significant, that trade show is a profit center. The security bond program, we manage the security bond program for, there's 250 leases, I think. Now, some of them don't apply because they don't need a security bond, but we actually operate the fund of about 110 leases in the province of Nova Scotia, and that's a profit center for us. And we worked this out with our members back when the fund was originated, that, well, why doesn't the association go get a group program so we can actually save money in the thing? And we don't mind if you make money, doing it and all that. And then the other major funding stream, if you looked at all of those projects, they're on that. We run those projects as a profit center. They're good for the industry, but they fund Stacy, for example. They fund our R&D coordinator. They help pay for those salaries so they can manage that stuff. So our funding all comes from all of those different funding streams.
Thank you.
Well,
Thanks, Tom. A couple of questions. I want to go back to the surety bond a bit because you mentioned it's only for, I guess, marine based, which doesn't fully make sense to me. And maybe there should be some negotiation with whoever's doing the regulations on that, because a land-based farm has input coming from the ocean. There's going to be some facilities out there that need to be cleaned up, perhaps if one goes bankrupt. So that's something that needs to be considered. In regards to that fund, it's fully self-funded?
yes.
It's not backed by a surety company or a bonding company?
Oh,
in any
sorry.
way?
Yeah, no, sorry. It is BFL Canada
Yeah.
is our surety fund operator.
Okay. All right. Are there specific limits?
Yes. So if you, and I don't have it with me, but you could actually go on our website and we publish the rate scale. And you can see, and it's all by type of operation, by size of operation, and by complexity of the operation, if you will. Yeah. So we actually publish the rate scale. I don't have it with me.
All right. Moving back on, so you gave a slide of licensing and lease regulations.
Yep.
They seem to be mainly for marine based. Do they also apply to land based agriculture?
Totally. Yeah, totally. Yeah. So, and that's why I said in one of the slides that, the operation of marine based, land based, hatchery, all of those things. So the regulations of Nova Scotia to get a lease or a license in the province of Nova Scotia, you have to satisfy all of those regulations. And so a land-based operation or a marine-based operation has to produce a development plan. So in other words, the development plan is how are you gonna run your operation. The farm management plan gets into things like fish health. The farm management plan gets into, number one, specifies the size of your farm. Farm management plan gets into the details of how many fish you're going to put on your farm. And the other thing I will tell you about the development plan and the farm management plan, they are administered by the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture in Nova Scotia, but they're audited and enforced by the Department of Environment. So the separation, and it was done specifically with the regulations in 2016, that it was done specifically that the regulator couldn't be the enforcer. And so that's why the Department of Environment is charged with enforcing the regulations. So they go around the province of Nova Scotia approves every farm management plan. Every license or lease, land-based, marine-based in the province of Nova has to have a farm management plan approved. The Department of Environment goes in, takes a hold of your farm management plan, and then looks at your operation and says, you said you're doing this, that's a violation. I'm hoping that never happens, but that's the way it kind of works. But so the quick answer is every farm in the province follows the same regulations. Every farm has to follow the same farm management plan templates and that sort of thing. Additional questions from PAC? Absolutely.
Research.
Yes.
You guys are heavily in research. Our previous presenters never had a lot of research on land-based sea, park.
Yep.
Marine park. And they had a lot of information on freshwater, but not saltwater, so still that bothers me some that, we don't have enough, we don't have a lot of information on seawater.
Really?
That's the fact it's gonna be
Okay,
on the outflow.
okay.
I'm understanding the input a lot better from our Boreal
Yeah,
presenters,
okay.
but I'm still concerned about the outflow into the seawater, right? So I'd like to see more information on that, which everybody says, well, it could, maybe, perhaps, hopefully. There's no
Yeah.
concrete information there, which is
Yeah.
difficult to absorb.
Well, I think we could actually provide you with some research on that. Again, I would stress that every single farm is gonna be different. Every single, development plan is gonna be different. So you can get a RAS system that is a recirculating system, that is a closed loop system. You can get a closed flow system, and they're all different. I would suspect that the folks at Boreal in their presentation should be able to provide you with a lot of that, because I can tell you there's loads of information going on, and the research that's going on in closed containment systems and recirculating systems with outflow into marine waters is going on right around the world. And there is research that's available. And if you'd like, I can undertake to provide a couple of papers that we can find. But the only thing I would stress is that, and I've seen Boreal's development plan or their operating plan that is posted on your website. And so I've seen that, so I understand some of what they're trying to do. But I can stress that I stress that all these systems are different. All the different operations are different, and it's not a cookie cutter one size fits all kind of thing. But I can share with you, we could undertake to provide you with a few just options of this is what's happening over here, this is what's happening over here, that sort of stuff. I mean, you've got some examples right here in Nova Scotia of successful, land-based systems. Some are close containment, and some are recirculating.
Appreciate that, but our particular area is much different than some of the other areas that are around. So.
Yeah. So and again, the only thing, well, here's what I would suggest is so what did the folks at Boreal? I know that they provided you with some of what they think their logic is, and they should be able to provide you with some more if you're looking for it.
But I know Boreal provides those information, but they're the ones, the proponents who are trying to get it to happen. So they're probably going to lean.
Well, and like I say, I can provide you with some
I'm not saying that's wrong.
Other operations. Oh no, I don't. I think it's absolutely right. I mean, they should tell you what they're going to do and then stand by it. I mean, that's kind of the nature of the beast, right? But on the other side, I think I could undertake to give you some examples of other situations.
Yeah.
And then you can compare it to the information that you have.
That'd be nice.
We've got a question from our CEO, Victoria Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So thanks for the presentation and for coming down and meeting with us. Getting back to the surety bonds.
Yeah.
So that's basically a protection of the public assets, the public resources. Have you ever had to use the bond money to do a cleanup?
No, and not yet. Don't forget, we're only 4 years into it on the whole thing. We've done 2 cleanups where the industry and our members, we said, we're just going to do it ourselves rather than take money out of the fund. So we've done 2 cleanups where we've actually taken all the gear out of the water, and the members all got together and said, we're responsible for this stuff, so we'll go and get it. Yeah. But no, we have not taken any money out of the fund.
How come
Yeah.
those members?
Right?
How come that when members decided to clean it up and?
Because I phoned them and said, I should say our
I
board.
didn't mean to
Actually.
interrupt you.
No, our board got together and we said, okay, well now, and this is how much we think it's going to cost if we contract it out. Do you know what? I think we could do it a little bit cheaper because we've got boats, we've got equipment, we've got people that know what's going on. And so, our board just said, why don't we get together some people and we'll go and fix it ourselves? And the province signed off on that and was happy with the results.
Any additional questions from PAC before we wrap things up today? Thanks. Listen, thank you so much for
Hey.
coming down and visiting our lovely Yarmouth municipality within Yarmouth County.
Oh, I tell you, but so I've been in the food business all my life, but I've worked for Atlantic Wholesalers and Co-op Atlantic. And so I've been in Yarmouth more times than I can count. So, whether it's Save Easy stores or superstores or whichever there. Yeah, anyway.
Well, you're
So
all-
thanks for the invite. We'd love to come down.
Absolutely, always welcome, and thank you for excellent presentation.
Appreciate it.
And the questions were well answered too, so that moves the bar ahead for us, and we're continuing to assemble information, and we're on Facebook Live.
You guys are special because, I was on the farm this morning, so I had to go get changed. And so, the condition, What's that? oh, yeah, yeah, the condition, so Stacy actually said, no, you gotta go change your pants and your shirt. Anyway, okay, it's great to meet you all.
Thank you. Safe travels. Okay, so we will, I'll look for a motion to recess until Thursday, November 25th at 3:30. Got a mover, seconder? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
We're all leaving together.
We're all agreement on that. Thank you. Motion carried.
Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. And for folks out there, again, Thursday, November 25th, 3:30 to 5, we'll be live on Facebook, and we'll be having Nova Scotia Fisheries and Aquaculture Department in, and Nathaniel Findell and Carla Buchan. They will be presenting, and really that's going to focus on licensing oversight enforcement. So we've had a taste. 3:30 Thursday, November 25th. So without further ado, thanks everybody. Excellent sessions, and very, very pleased with how the process went forward. Thank you. Great question.